billboard and was a bright light of a store, for instance, we would have protections probably under environmental law in the state and other mechanisms. But what can we do to look at and to try to move forward on returning that balance back to the community and back to the residents?
Pointing out the number of digital billboards that have appeared seemingly overnight in his District 11, Bill Rosendahl explains what he and some of his constituents plan to do to fend off the assault of digital billboards.
We put a motion in, my district did, I did, to catalog the assault my district has taken on billboards. In fact, we have more digital billboards, I would say. Maybe Mr. Weiss and I together are the big ones on it, but I can tell you my district is over the top, and they popped up out of nowhere in the last year. Out of nowhere. All of a sudden, they're everywhere. So we're going out Saturday. We're going to have 100 people at least on the street, okay? I'm going to be there too. And I've met with Building and Safety. Hector, I met with some of your superiors, and we're expecting you guys to be with us in a pre-meeting ahead of time so that we gather the data appropriately. We don't want to wait anymore. We've had it. We've waited long enough. Nothing has happened. It's just a disaster. So you'll be with us. We're going to catalog this stuff. We're going to take pictures. We're going to have addresses, and we're going to be able to give it back. City Attorney, we want to move this as quickly as we can. We'll do it Saturday. We were last night in the Venice Neighborhood Council. They're all excited. Brentwood, the Palisades, Mar Vista, Westchester, the entire district is going to be out there Saturday cataloging them.
Saying we need to take away all of the reasons why it doesn't get done, District 1 Council member Ed Reyes asks about the availability of staff to do the job.
How many inspectors do we have to do this job?
Actually, to do the annual or the periodic inspection program, we do not have the staff. We started the program in 2002, and then we were stopped by order of the court. And because of that, the staff that had been approved was cut.
So you don't have staff to do this job?
We do not have the staff to do the periodic inspection program. That is correct.
So all the work that the citizenry is going to do in District 11 is going to fall on whom?
It would have to be done by the current staff.
Permanent staff?
Yes.
Now you're saying permanent staff can't do the job?
Well, they already are doing, they have plenty of work. This would be additional work that they would have to do along with the other work.
Okay, this is what we need to do. I'm really frustrated. I've been saying this for the past year and a half. Everything's been said that needed to be said. I just need for us in Plum, in 2 weeks into November, before the break begins, before everyone starts going on their vacation time, a list of all the motions that have been presented to this department and a status on each one.
So it's all before us now. Open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote.
10 ayes.
Matter passes. Thank you.
And joining us now by phone is District 13 Council member Eric Garcetti. Mr. Garcetti, welcome back to Council Week in Review.
It's always great to be with you, Jack.
Normally, to kick off a conversation about billboards, of course, I would ask you, how many billboards do we have in Los Angeles? But that's one of the issues here, isn't it? Nobody really seems to know.
It absolutely is. That's one of our great frustrations, is we've inherited decades of kind of the wild, wild west when it comes to billboards, and things have gone up over the years, and some of them legally, some of them illegally, and the city has done a lousy job of tracking them, and it's time that we change that.
With all these billboards out there, uncounted billboards, how about billboard companies? How many of them do business here in Los Angeles, and why are there so many lawsuits filed against the city by these companies?
Well, we have probably about 5 or 6 major ones and a lot of smaller players that are trying to get in this extremely profitable field right now. But I think part of the reason we have so many lawsuits is for billboard companies that have billboards, even if they're illegal, if they can tie up any moves by the city to regulate them in court, the more years, the more months that go by, the more money they can make while these legal suits are being settled. So it's really in their interest not to have this stuff resolved in the short term, but to draw this out as long as possible. We've got some good billboard companies that are good actors and want to do the right thing and worked with us very quickly to resolve the issues of illegal billboards, but other ones decided to go straight to court, and we have literally dozens of lawsuits now, including from small companies, with everybody trying to get the city's laws weakened across the board.
As I drive around town, and I'm sure you have the same experience, you see some very big national corporate names on the bottoms of these billboards. These are big companies.
Well, absolutely. You see big corporate names at the bottom of the billboards and also on the billboards. And I think that's an important point, that we not only need to send a clear message to some of the companies that are the billboard companies that are owned by large conglomerates, CBS, Clear Channel, some of the others that are there, but also to the companies that would advertise on some of the illegal billboards. It's important for them to know that we can help dry up the supply, the actual consumer confidence, if you will, in these companies if they're willing to so aggressively take up these billboards in our communities in ways that are oftentimes illegal, especially with our super graphics that we're seeing, those big, huge ones that are wrapped around entire buildings.
I can't be the only one who thought that billboards had to be permitted before they could be installed. First of all, is that true? Do you have to get a permit?
Yes, you do have to get a permit, but we had years and years in the 80s and 90s of illegal ones that went up without a permit. So the reality in Los Angeles was you didn't need a permit for many years, but part of what the resolution that we're looking towards is to make sure we bring down the illegal ones and get our hands around a count of the legal ones so that we can make sure there are not any illegal changes made. We've seen single-sided billboards suddenly get a second side overnight. We've seen some billboards go up next to freeways where they're prohibited. We've seen other billboards literally on holidays be put in completely illegal locations, and I think people think the longer they can get it up, well, the city will just accept them as legal, but we're going to try to change that.
Well, you just mentioned the billboards that can be seen from the freeways. You drive down the Harbor Freeway or up the Harbor Freeway, they're everywhere, and they're obviously directed at people on the freeway, which, as you point out, is illegal.
That's correct. It was, I think, Kenny Hahn, when he was a city council member, or perhaps it was when he was a supervisor, who wrote legislation. It must have been when he was a city council member, because it was for the city of L.A. And in fact, you know when you leave the city of Los Angeles quite often, because there are cities that are neighboring areas that do permit billboards right next to freeways. And as soon as you leave the city of Los Angeles limits, you're just assaulted by many billboards, oftentimes electronic, in some of our neighboring cities. And that's really the case up and down the Harbor Freeway, where we see some of the smaller cities that are adjacent to Los Angeles and right there next to the freeway.
You mentioned the wraparound billboards, and certainly at Hollywood and Highland, there's an example of another kind of creative way to do billboards. What about these digital billboards that suddenly seem to be everywhere?
You know, there's some appropriate places to have billboards and signage. You know, the ticker tape at Times Square is very famous in New York City, and we've got some great examples of old neon signs in Hollywood, some new neon signs, some zipper signs and blade signs, you know, that really are creative and part of a general tourist district, entertainment district. But we also see a ton of illegal super graphics, they're called, which is when somebody takes the entire side of a building and slaps up with these giant ads. There are a few of these in the city that are legal, but they are so profitable. People can make $60,000, $70,000 a month off of these things in some cases, that we're seeing them go up, and the city's penalties have not kept pace with the profits. So even those that are up illegally, people will keep them up because really compared to the fines that they face, they can make much more money keeping an illegal billboard up there with the profits they make versus the fine that the city puts forward.
$60,000 to $70,000 a month? Maybe I should put something on the side of my house.
Jack Popejoy decided to quit today from Channel 35 and become a super graphic guy.
Perhaps the answer to this is blindingly obvious. I know you've talked about this in council, especially with the digital signs that change every few seconds. What kind of problems do these really create? What's wrong with them?
Well, you know, it's interesting. The digital billboards that have been popping up everywhere, these conversions, where it's not movement within each image, but there is movement between images, where there will be 3 or 4 different images that change every 4 seconds. It's very disruptive to the driver, and it can be very disruptive in the community. In some cases, these billboards are not as bright as the paper billboards that were there before, but in some cases, they're turned up so high that they go into people's homes, they go into their living rooms, into their bedrooms, especially where there's residential areas that we're seeing these creep up, such as one in my own district on Silver Lake Boulevard that popped up one day, and suddenly the entire area, which is primarily a residential canyon, was really beset by these bright lights. But, you know, when we look at the different billboards that are out there, the most important thing is to try to regulate the place and the manner, and to restrict some of those aspects so that we can make sure that any billboards that stay up in the city of Los Angeles are in more appropriate areas, but that we really put the power back into the community hands, that we give them the environmental protections that we would give them if it was just a sign for a restaurant or a sign for a store. Those are already in California state law, and that's what my motion has asked our city attorney to look at. Do we have these sort of protections to make sure the public has input, has feedback, and in some cases protection to say no?
So to be clear, these kinds of billboards on the Sunset Strip don't trouble you very much, but you'd like to see zoning to where these kind of billboards can go.
Well, in some cases they would. I mean, those types of billboards, if they were someplace else. The Sunset Strip, is in the city of West Hollywood, but certainly in entertainment areas, by the convention center, in Central Hollywood, on the Walk of Fame, places like that, people go there to expect. They go there to shop. They go there to experience a kind of more dynamic area. And, just as we've seen in other very famous parts of the world, from Leicester Square in London to Times Square in New York, there may be some places where it's part of that vibe, but it's not when you have to face, as I do on the way home, 14 billboards, sometimes in people's front yards, when in residential canyons we see, bright lights from digital billboards that are being converted. What we need to be able to do is not put the power in the hands of the billboard companies to decide where these go, but really to put them in the hands of the people in the neighborhoods. We can't stop all of them, and in some cases we might not want to prohibit them always. But what we do need to have is control with the neighborhoods, control in the residents' hands, and not just dictated to us by these companies.
To look at it from the other side of the telescope, Department of Building and Safety oversees billboard regulations. It looks to me, as the average citizen, they are completely overwhelmed by the speed at which these digital signs are going up. I assume they're just understaffed, and that's part of the problem.
That is part of the problem, though we have assured the Department of Building and Safety that if they start doing their inventory, we will make sure that they have the resources. It's a lean budget year, but part of the settlement is that we would be able to collect a permit fee from each one of these billboards in the city, and that will help pay for the additional staff we need to inspect them, to make sure that people do have them permitted legally, and in some cases where conversions are occurring, that we have the information ahead of time so that neighborhoods can defend themselves or give public feedback. If we can't get that, or maybe even alongside at the same time, we are looking at a 6-month ban through what's called an interim control ordinance that would ban these across the board in the city until we can get our head around a process that works for the communities and not just for the companies.
When you're talking about this interim moratorium, I guess it would be, would that apply only to digital signs, or would that apply to all billboards?
We're looking at both avenues. Certainly in the short term, people want something done with the digital conversions, and I think there's a growing consensus on that. But I welcomed the city attorney who came to our planning commission, which I've been working with very closely, to perhaps offer that we would ban all, including these super graphics and other regular billboards, to ban all new boards for the next 6 months, to be able to really put our hands around how we can rewrite the sign ordinance in a way that would be, A, upheld legally by the courts. And you have to remember, the billboard companies challenged based on the First Amendment, bring in some of the finest lawyers in the country, and have pretty consistently won those cases, so it has to be upheld by the courts. But B, have something that will also give a process to the community, based not on something against billboards, but based on the same protections we have right now for all new buildings and structures in any community. That's the most basic California state law, and we hope that it will apply here too.
Well, obviously, Councilman, this kind of begs the question, if these billboards have gone up and we haven't noticed them, if they've gone up without permits, how could we enforce a moratorium?
Well, that was part of the negotiation. The legal ones we know, those were ones that were put up in certain series of years that were negotiated. Those would be taken down. But when these other ones are going up, I mean, there is a process right now on these conversions where the companies are going to the Department of Building and Safety. What we need that department to do then is to give the community the heads up and to be able to have in place a process for feedback. Until we have that in place, it would seem appropriate that we could ask the Department of Building and Safety to turn down any of these conversions during this period of our moratorium. And what that does is it gives us 6 months for us all to take a deep breath, sit down with the sign companies and say, look, this is clearly something that the communities are upset about, that residential areas feel is inappropriate, and increasingly on the City Council, look forward to finding allies to be able to put that forward and perhaps revisit the settlement that we had from the court in the first place.
If there's a fee charged for legal billboards out there, and these digital billboards are capable of multiple advertisements, possibly a fee per advertisement on the same billboard?
Well, unfortunately, the fee has to be attached to what is the city's cost for doing its business. So if it requires additional city time to inspect a billboard that's digital, I think we could justify a higher price. But otherwise, it can't be based on the income of the billboard as the law is written. Under Prop 13, we can only justify a fee that directly goes towards people who are doing the work related to that fee. So in this case, we can only use it to hire as many building inspectors as we need, and as much money as we need to hire those building inspectors. We can't, in other words, necessarily take money, some profit on the side of that, though certainly that is something that the people of LA and other cities have called on their leaders to do, and we've seen examples in other cities where the city is the beneficiary, not just the passive bystander for these immensely profitable billboards.
And finally, the council has been criticized in many quarters for focusing on these digital billboards in the community, but what about LA Live? What about the convention center? The council seems to be giving them a big pass.
Well, what we passed was the ability to negotiate with them, and we have to make the decision in a very lean budget year, is this one of the appropriate places in the city to be able to put new signage, where people are coming to the Staples Center and people are coming to Nokia. It's obviously a place where it's an entertainment district, where people are already seeing advertisement, and that's part of the dynamic neighborhood feel of that area. Would that be an appropriate place? And in exchange there, we do have the potential to have a profit-sharing agreement so that instead of either cutting services in the city or trying to raise taxes, we would get a couple $1 million a year that would help us continue those critical city services. But to me, that's very different than whether we see billboards in people's neighborhoods where they live, in their residential areas. That is very different from the character of most places in Los Angeles. We will look very closely at whether it's appropriate to put them on the side that faces the freeway for safety reasons, but there's 3 other sides of the convention center that may be very good places for the people of Los Angeles to earn a little money off of these and be able to continue their city services without raising taxes.
An evolving issue that I know we'll be talking about again. Council President Eric Garcetti, thanks for joining us on Council Week in Review.
Thank you, Jack, for covering this. Really appreciate it.
The Building and Safety Status Report as to the number and location of billboards in Los Angeles is due back in front of Council on January 31st, 2009. LA City View is the government access cable channel for the City of Los Angeles, featuring live coverage of City Council meetings and programming about City Department services and events. You can watch City Council meetings live or view past meetings by going to the city's website at lacity.org and follow the instructions for video on demand. And we invite you to address the Los Angeles City Council on any item on the council agenda, as well as during public comment. You may come downtown to City Hall or go to the Van Nuys City Hall and participate via video teleconferencing. Remember, you can watch all Los Angeles City Council meetings live in their entirety on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays beginning at 10 a.m. On Sundays, you can watch the replay of all the week's meetings, also beginning at 10 a.m. Council Week in Review can be seen Monday through Friday at 9:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. and on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. Well, that concludes our program for the week ending October 24th, 2008. On behalf of Taffy Eason and everyone here at Channel 35, I'm Jack Popejoy. Thank you for watching, and please join us for the next Council Week in Review.
I vote because it's my right as an American. As an eligible voter in LA County, you have the right and responsibility to make yourself heard. Voters with specific needs can make a difference too, and you can vote privately and with dignity. If you need help reading or you need to vote from your wheelchair, there are resources available to you. So on Election Day, remember, voting is your right. Go online to lavote.net for information on accessible voting services. Vote. You count.
Would you pay to euthanize your healthy family pet? Of course not. So why let your tax dollars be used to do just that? Hello, I'm Councilmember Ed Reyes, reminding you that a new law will take effect October 1st to humanely decrease the number of abandoned pets discarded every year. Let's make Los Angeles the most humane city in the country. Spay or neuter your cats and dogs. Go to LAAnimalServices.com or 1-800-SPAY-4LA.
LA City View Channel 35. Your city, your channel.
Angeles, and welcome to the City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 28, 2008. We're here in the John Ferraro Council Chamber, room 340 of City Hall, where we meet every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. The first Friday of the month, we move over to Van Nuys City Hall in our efforts to bring City Council closer to all Angelinos. I want to welcome our guests here in Council Chambers, members of the public who have joined us, as well as our viewers on Channel 35, which broadcasts each council meeting live and rebroadcasts in the evening the council meetings as well. You can always avail yourself of your computer and go to lacity.org and watch the council meetings via webcast as well. And we archive past council meetings for your convenience there, where there's also a wealth of information about city departments, elected officials, and other ways you can improve the quality of your life here in Los Angeles. Finally, if you're not close to a television or a computer, you can always use your telephone to listen to the council meetings by calling Council Phone. That number is 213-621-CITY, 213-621-CITY, and that's available not just for council meetings, but also for our committee meetings. I'm Council President Eric Garcetti, and I'm joined today by my colleagues who are here pursuant to council rules on time. Council members Alarcon, Reyes, and Zine. That only comprises 4 members. We need 10 or 2/3 of our 15-member body to begin the meeting and establish a quorum. Councilmember Parks is excused today, as is Ms. Gruhl to arrive at 10:30. That means we are awaiting Mr. Cardenas, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Huizar, Mr. Labange, Ms. Perry, Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. Smith, Mr. Weiss, and Mr. Wesson, who are now late. If they will please join us as soon as possible so we can begin the meeting. Our agendas are available online at lacity.org or here in person at City Hall, either through our city clerk's office or in council chambers. Pursuant to the state's Brown Act, those are made available 72 hours in advance or 24 hours in advance for any special meeting items. Members of the public are invited to give public testimony on any items that come before the council. Many of those receive that public hearing in the committee. So as you look through the agenda and it says items for which public hearings have already been held, those have had their public hearings in committee and require a council member to reopen the council hearing to get more public input here. If an item has not yet received public hearing in committee, those are classified in the agendas under items for which public hearings have not yet been held. And if you'd like to be heard, feel free to fill out a speaker card in the back and give that to one of the sergeants at arms, or in Van Nuys, where we're able to watch you remotely, give that to the staff there, and we will be sure to hear your comments. Finally, there is a section of the meeting called General Public Comment, in which items that are not on the agenda, but nevertheless under the jurisdiction, are up for comment. And if you'd like to be heard, just fill out a speaker card and put public comment or general public comment in the upper right corner, and just hand that to the sergeant at arms, and we will be sure to include your comments. Thank you to Mr. Rosendahl, who has joined us. That leaves still Mr. Cardenas, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Huizar, Mr. Labange, Ms. Perry, Mr. Smith, Mr. Weiss, and Mr. Wesson. We're only at 5 members. It's 10:10 now. This will be our second to last quorum call. If council members will please make their way down right away. Thank you. We are still awaiting Mr. Cardenas, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Labange, Mr. Weiss, and Ms. Perry. That's Mr. Cardenas, Ms. Hahn, Mr. Labange, Ms. Perry, and Mr. Weiss. We're one member short of a quorum. If we don't get a quorum in the next couple of minutes, we will cancel the meeting for lack of a quorum. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alarcon, Cardenas, Gruel, Hahn, Weezer, Labange, Parks, Perry, Reyes, Rosendahl, Smith, Weiss, Westenstein, Garcetti. 10 members present and a quorum, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. First order of business, please.
Approval of the minutes.
Mr. Zine moves and Mr. Rosendahl seconds. Without objection, those will be approved. Next order of business.
Commendatory resolutions for approval.
All right. Mr. Alarcon moves and Ms. Gruel seconds. Without objection, those two will be approved.
Mr. President, this is Tuesday and there's a flag salute.
Okay. If I could ask everybody please rise in council chambers for our Pledge of Allegiance. And Mr. Zine, would you be kind enough to lead us?
Yes, sir. Place your hand over your heart. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Zine, if we can run through the agenda, please.
On the regular agenda, items 1 through 6 are items noticed for public hearing. These are ordinances, and there should be 12 members today.
Okay. Let's hold. Mr. Labange is here, so let's go ahead and open and close those public hearings. If anybody wishes to call those special from the council, 1 through 6. Not, please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 7 through 24 are items for which public hearings have been held. On item 10, there is a request to continue the matter one day to October 29th.
Any objection to continuing item 7 one day till the 29th?
Actually, Mr. Item 10.
I'm sorry. Till which day, sorry?
Till tomorrow.
Oh, till tomorrow. Okay. If there's no objection, we will go ahead and continue item 10 one day.
And there is also a request to continue item 23 one day to October 29th.
Any objection, colleagues? Continuing item 23 for one day. Seeing none, that will be continued as well. Special items 7 through 24. Any specials? Again, 7 through 24. Seeing no specials. 7 through 24. 10 for, we continue that one day. No other specials. Let's go ahead, please, on the balance. Open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 25 through 35 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay, 25 through 35. Do we have cards on any of those?
There are cards on item 30.
Okay, let's call 30 special for card from the public. We'll open and close the other public hearings. Any specials, colleagues? 25 through 35. 25 through 35. Seeing no specials, let's go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Okay, those are approved. If we can call the roll for the, or sorry, if we can, yes,
25 forthwith, please.
25 forthwith without objection. Absolutely. We can go to supplemental, council.
On the supplemental agenda, items 36 and 37 are items for which public hearings have been held.
Okay, I'll call 37 special. 36, anybody wishing to call special? If not on 36, we will go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Those are approved. Next items, please.
Items 38 through 40 are items for which public hearings have not been held. 10 votes are required for consideration.
Okay. Any objection? If not, those are before us. Do we have cards from the public on any of those?
we have been told of no cards.
Okay, we'll open and close the public hearing. Anybody wishing to call 38 through 40? Any specials? 38 through 40? Mr. Smith?
39.
39, okay. Let's take up then 38 and 40. If nobody wishes to call those special, please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 eyes.
Those are approved. We'll go now to general public comment. This is a time for items that are not on the agenda, but nevertheless under the jurisdiction of the council. Each speaker will have 2 minutes at the lectern there. So we have a little clock there to help you guide your time. And we welcome you to City Council this morning. Richard Kearns is our first speaker. And after that will be Michael Hubman. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Richard Kearns. I'm an AIDS activist, a 57-year-old gay man with AIDS. I'm also a medical cannabis advocate. This is a poem called River Beast. I roll into Monday morning brightness, feet seeking earth, a Sundayless listener waiting to wake, medicating for non-heval, sun burnishing the pain. I hear the river road call deep hummed, feel the pull of my wet trailing blue shoe sailing, one at a time, souls don't fail me, precepts, practice dreamed and planned to imaginary imperfection, traipsed to my inner port and back in unanticipation and urgency and certain seemed surety about returnity. Shots and pre-pills and ointments and more pre. River song, river call, river might, river thrall, river beat, river on fire, shivering heat, risen like a dawn wind from gilded waves as they burn. Aroused now, my river beast sallies the day, battling 40,000 fathoms of mud, heart first. I'm here today to recommend that the Medical Cannabis Working Group be reconvened to sort of shepherd that project to completion. From where I stand, it's kind of stalled out, and there are some issues about accountability and whether anything is going to happen with it. It's almost November already. Are we going to have to re-extend the moratorium to do that? I think we all need to be involved in the community in moving this along. And the practical matter is the working group is in place already. We've worked together already. So I think it's a good place to start to move this project to completion. So I would urge you to do that and consider that. And I'm also feeling better now. A year ago, I was in the hospital, so I'd like to work on the working group. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kearns. Glad to hear you're doing better. Michael Hubman is our next speaker. After that, we'll go to the Valley and Donna Pearman. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Michael Hubman, and I'm a human rights and homeless rights activist. And while my opinions are my own, today I am speaking as a member of the newly formed Coalition for the Abolition of Safer Cities Initiative. And our mission is to end socioeconomic cleansing on Skid Row, Los Angeles. Now that term socioeconomic cleansing was derived from ethnic cleansing. So in the coming months I'll examine the parallels between the two. For today, I'd like to just look at Safer Cities. In the 2 years it's been around, 18,000 arrests have been made and 24,000 nuisance citations have been visited on the poorest of the poor in a 50-square block area of downtown Los Angeles, more than the rest of the city combined. These people are commonly elderly and sick, and we've got to do better. We can do better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments this morning. Donna Pearman and Van Nuys will be our next speaker. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Garcetti. Anyway, City Council. You can stop Time Warner for stopping not showing the City Council meetings at the end of the year. We won't be able to see City Council on Channel 35. People have the right of knowing what's going on, and not everyone is able to hear it at 10 a.m. or have access to a computer. So please look into that and save our Channel 35. Mr. Garcetti, I called your office. We got no answers. Since they couldn't answer, I guess PII, I will say I hope Zumadog is not correct that you you will leave to Washington if Obama wins election. Heard that you're going to run for a third term on the Channel Purview, and I hope you do. I say as Eric Garcetti, superdelegate without money, vote for Eric Garcetti for 13th District and Bill Rosendahl for District 11. Now for serious subjects. People in the Valley. Prop R is another gimmick. You'll be paying for it and getting little benefit. We'll be mostly benefiting L.A. and a lot of high rail projects. We don't need that. We need to fix the buses that we have over here. And we need to fix the buses over in West Los Angeles, the 720 specifically, who doesn't go enough down to Santa Monica. And we need to vote against the gang tax. They will spend a lot of money with night basketball and well-thought-out ideas, but won't do a thing. We all have the same gangs, the same problems. It's on our hands, people. We should be voting against... Uh-oh, my time is not going down on the thing, so I don't know how much time I have. Anyway, we need to vote against all these bond issues that will make our property taxes go way up. We can't afford them right now. We're having home foreclosures right now. We're having people living on paycheck. Less than paycheck to paycheck, where they have to go out and borrow, and that's why a lot of people are also in the trouble, as Wall Street was. But do you see anybody bailing us out? Do you see anybody giving us a break so that we can pay our bills in a normal amount? And if they didn't take so much of our taxes, we can actually take home and take care of ourselves. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perman. Appreciate your comments. Miriam Fogler is next, but just before that, I want to recognize Mr. Reyes for a quick introduction, then we'll come back to you, Ms. Fogler, in 2 seconds. Go ahead.
Thank you, Council President. Colleagues, during crisis, during catastrophes, during occasions when we find ourselves struggling with an apartment that's been burned down, we reach to a very important organization. That's American Red Cross. So I want to publicly thank Paul Schultz, Chief Executive Officer, Nicholas D. Samaniego, Director of Public Affairs, for joining us today. They're in City Hall. Just want to have them stand and give them a round of applause for all they do in our great city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyes, and thank you on behalf of the city for all you do at the Red Cross. We appreciate your efforts. We will next go to Miriam Fogler in Van Nuys and then Rick Nightingale. Good morning, Ms. Fogler.
Yes, good morning. So all those people who remember Prop 13, remember, folks, the parcel tax is on top of Proposition 13. So don't get it confused, and people are going to be confused when they go to the polls. Vote no on all the bond issues, except, well, the veterans one is a good one. But I don't know about 7 and 10. It's questionable. You need to find out more about it. I'm going to do that today. Secondly, I read in the paper today, DWP is paying up all these government agencies, and they don't want to be sued, so they're settling. Well, us consumers need to do the same thing. And it's not right. I have a big electric bills during the summer. I couldn't afford it, so I'm going to go and get my because I'm disabled. Anybody out there that is disabled is can get the discount on their bill. If they can't, they have to have air conditioning. And what else? Well, folks, I'm taking a deep breath because voting is a big responsibility. And if you think it's not, look at what we have this year. We have a far leftist, Obama. We have a man who is erratic, McCain. Both of these candidates have problems. But the most problem I have is someone who wants to take away your guns. Remember about the Supreme Court ruling. Obama is against the right to bear and keep arms. It's in the NRA magazine. He said that he's going to take away any guns that are used in self-defense and prosecute them and charge 500% tax on all firearms. Secondly, McCain, he wants to raise taxes on corporations. So we have nobody that's for the people. All we have is politicians who want to raise our taxes, and all they're doing is just saying what they want to get voted in.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fogler. Rick Nightingale is our next speaker, also in Van Nuys.
Yes, good morning, Rick Nightingale. Boy, I sure was appalled this week that what happened over in West L.A. regarding Sharon Palin. I'll tell you, I don't know what it's coming to. I mean, people wonder why people get so upset with different people and nationalities and so forth. I mean, I was going through the stations, and I mean, people might not like what I'm going to say, but I'm really sorry. But between the blacks and Hispanics, turn around, and they got all these different awards, and now I just noticed that they got another power award, they call it. I mean, they get mad, and I don't want to put race in it, but like for white people, I'm not all white. I turn around, I'm Indian, I'm English, I'm German, and everything else. That's immaterial, what race, what color, or anything else. But they turn around and they have to bring in race and religion and everything else, that they just can't be human beings. I just don't understand it. And I hate to say it, but if somebody put up a mannequin up there, it would be a race thing. It would be it'd go into a riot. And I didn't see anything in the news regarding they went over there and took care of business, said you can't do this or whatever. I don't know what you people can do. I don't know. I don't even know what the people can do, the average people or whatever. You people lost the values. It's just unbelievable. There's just no values. People aren't taught at home, I guess. I don't know. I was taught to respect your other person. And it's just not there. I don't know what you people can do about it, but it ain't working. It just isn't working. Until everybody considers themselves equal, like people get up at the council there and says that they're prosecuted and so forth and about slavery and so forth. That's all a bunch of junk. We didn't have it to this side of the Rocky Mountains, and I don't believe it's there now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nightingale. Our next speaker is here in council chambers, Bill Corcoran. And after that will be Daniel Wright. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning. This may be on your agenda today. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the Sierra Club in appreciation to Councilwoman Hahn, the City Council, and the Mayor for the support for the Clean Trucks program in the port. This is a program that can reduce toxic air pollution, noise, address climate change, and improve the condition of labor and neighborhoods all at the same time. The Sierra Club, along with its labor and environmental partners, is firmly committed to providing an employee mandate as part of this Clean Truck program, and we're heartened by news that Attorney General Brown has been challenging inappropriate contract classification. As you know, as the door closes behind the Bush administration, there's an effort at the Federal Maritime Commission to undo parts of this plan. The Sierra Club is deeply concerned with industry challenges to this program and are working ourselves to stave them off. And we appreciate any support from the Council and Mayor and that leadership that we can offer in defending this program before the Federal Maritime Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. Appreciate your activism on that. Daniel Wright is our next speaker, and then Arnold Sachs. Good morning.
Good morning. Daniel Wright, 467 Crane Boulevard. On behalf of those members of the organizations in the Friends of the Southwest Museum Coalition who have urged a no vote on Measure J, the Los Angeles Community College District's $3.5 billion bond doggle. These comments are in response to this council adoption of a resolution supporting Measure J outside of a regular meeting of this council. The action of the council is null and void because the council failed to give the public 72 hours notice before considering its resolution. Measure J contains a poison provision to give away $11.5 million to the Autry National Center. LA Community College District Trustee Mona Field, who I think is responsible for inserting this backroom deal into Measure J, last week denied that she knew how the Autry corporate welfare provision ended up in the Measure J project list. However, this summer at the June 11th and July 23rd trustee meetings, Ms. Field moved and voted on amendments to the project list that included the Southwest Museum on the LACC motion that she voted on. Her claims otherwise are an admission to the public that she knows that this sweetheart deal for private interests is against the majority views of her constituents. But Measure J is unreasonable for bigger reasons as well. It asks for $3.5 billion of bonding authority when LACCD has not even issued 30% of the bonds from the previous two measures. That's $657 million as shown on their own budget sheet that is distributed to council. Officials put this massive bond on the ballot because political advisors to the public agencies advised them that Obama would turn out many young voters who have a likelihood of voting for these measures. This is an opportunistic bond, It seeks to gain a decade's worth of bonding authority without voter accountability, and it should be turned down. Please reconsider your resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Our next speaker is Arnold Sachs. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to use this opportunity for a quick civics lesson on the system of checks and balances that's so readily available in this city. There's been a lot of talk recently about billboards. The judicial branch of the city attorneys, had a settlement in 2006 that allows 800 billboards to become electronic. The legislative branch, or the city council, just recently allowed billboard signage at the sports arena, not the sports arena, Staples Center and the Convention Center, giving it away for $2 million. The mayor, who would be the executive, chose not to veto this giveaway. He vetoed the award for the Trenny Price hearing because he claimed it was too much. $2 million for signage at the Staples Center. Now you may ask, why is that important? Well, the city council, in its brilliant ways, wants to inventory the signage throughout the city and collect fees. There was a quote that there's money coming in from Staples Center that we never had before. And the reason we never had it before is because you never had any advertising there before. Maybe you can consider advertising at City Hall. Why not wrap the City Hall like a giant prophylactic? Because the way this council is screwing the public over, it would be so apropos. The fact of the matter is, the settlement that the city is going to seek from billboard companies will be based on the amount of money that's going to be generated at Staples Center. A giveaway. $7 million for rape kit clearing up. $2 million. At least when Jack gave away his cash cow, he got some beans. All we're getting is gas.
That closes our general public comment. We'll go to items called special now, starting with item number 30, which is called special for cards from the public. We'll go to Van Nuys. Miriam Fogler is our next speaker, and then Donna Pearman on item number 30. Good morning again.
Yes, good morning. And here we go again. You know, we're having these budget problems and, you know, bailing out the Wall Street. Why couldn't they bail out the foreclosures, the homes here in L.A. County and L.A. City, folks? And here they got all these, these items for fee waivers. Some of them are church and states infringements. You know, obviously, that this is incorrect. That the government should be getting into that, and also you need to get people to donate to these different events. So we need to have the banks, the creditors, to stop making prices so hard for people to stay in their homes. They need to use this money. You can open up to make sure that the banks are lowering the rates instead of using money here for the fee waivers. To enforcing regulation, folks, we need that. Because otherwise, we're not going to have a country much left if we don't have people living in their homes here, making a living, and having children in schools. You know, you just can continue to have more people become homeless, and then what? What are these fee waivers for? What are they going to do for the homeless? What are they going to do about the people who are foreclosed? And what about the seniors and the disabled getting the services that they deserve in this city? There's not very much to speak for, because the fact of the matter is that the Water and Power is giving out millions of dollars to other government agencies when they don't give any help to their ratepayers, and then they turn around and give the DWP employees big raise this month, and don't give the rest of the city employees that same raise. We should have that in the clause. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna Pearman is our next speaker.
Anyway, we have to stop having so many fee waivers. This is Donna. I thought you were cutting down on the agenda, only had a few last time. Now we have up to 13 fee waivers. We don't have the money to continue having block parties, festivals, most of which are only enjoyed by a small and paid by the big bunch of people. In the meantime, we have to add bond issues. Our transportation system is falling apart. Problems that Prop R won't address, even Prop A1 won't address. Our city would have enough money if they didn't spend millions on fee waivers. I don't feel it's right to waive so many Christian events over the Jewish events. And we shouldn't have these fee waivers. And in USC, we shouldn't be paying for USC. Certainly, they have their own money, and they certainly get enough. We shouldn't have more trash tax. We shouldn't have that because we have more trash tax, electric tax, gas tax, parcel tax. I agree to disabled and seniors who have to juggle other things like food and medicine so they can be able to afford their bills. That these fee waivers shouldn't be there. These are the wrong thing to do. Each time, 3 times a week, sometimes it's up to 3 times a week, sometimes it's not. But a lot of times I do see them up to 3 times a week doing fee waivers. So I wish one time you would have the guts to actually say no on fee waivers, but I don't see that happening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There are no additional cards on this item. Madam or Mr. Clerk, would you please open the roll, close the roll, tabulate the vote?
14 ayes.
Next item, please.
Item 37, called special by Councilmember Garcetti.
All right, Mr. Garcetti, you're up.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I would move that we had a public hearing, and I want to make sure we have departmental representatives and the mayor's office and others come forward to walk through a very exciting proposal that we have before us, taking advantage of our most plentiful of resources, the sun, here in Los Angeles. But I would move first that we reopen the public hearing for any cards that are here, and then we will, if you can hold my time, I will come back and continue with questions and some comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. We have several speakers, and I'll call out their names, and you can come to the lectern and line up. Jorge Rodriguez. Ron Gastelum, and then there's someone here from the Los Angeles Basin Solar Power Green Energy and Jobs Development Mandate. The organization is SCOPE, but there's no name. And then
this is Jorge Rodriguez.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Mr. Rodriguez, why don't you start?
Yeah, this we just sent a letter to the mayor and also all the city council members. It's letters from our business manager, Sergio Rascon, Labor's Local 300, council members and mayor. Labor's Union Local 300 represents over 8,000 building trades, men and women in the greater Los Angeles area. Many of our members live and work in the city of Los Angeles and are customers of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. We have some concerns regarding the Green Energy and Jobs for Los Angeles Act as it is currently written. Local 300 is a strong supporter of green energy. Much of the work involving the installation of solar panels is building trades work. The building trades have built this city, and we want to make sure that the Act includes the building trades and Local 300 members as part of the green energy movement in the city. We urge you to pass a version of the Act that includes the ability of all of Los Angeles, including fair contractors and building trades workers, to participate in solar panel installation work so that the work is done safely and efficiently. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. Sincerely, Sergio Rascon, Business Manager, Labor's Local 300. And we've been doing part of this work in other areas also.
Thank you very much. Ron Gastelum.
Good morning. My name is Ron Gastelum. I am representing the LA Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm on their board of directors. This is a laudable goal. I think all of us understand that in our country today, it is very important for us to take major steps forward on the national level, state level, and certainly on the local level to implement renewable technologies. But as we sit here today and think about this, I think we know that there are major uncertainties about exactly how we're going to do that. Technology, cost, priorities, utilities that aren't necessarily ready to integrate these technologies into their business. So much work is before us. I'm here today on behalf of the LA Chamber of Commerce to commend the council and the mayor for taking leadership on this issue. We want to engage. We want to plan with you. We do not want you to go forward with the version of the proposal before you. We have submitted proposed amendments. The idea of the amendments is to provide more flexibility, to bring as many people to the table, including the private sector, take advantage of the tax credits that are available, which will reduce costs and impacts to ratepayers. I will say, as a former and longtime utility manager, undertaking something of this magnitude with the costs that are proposed is ill-advised unless you do, as I think many of you are thinking, get a plan, integrate that plan with DWP's program, make sure all of our labor constituencies are at the table as well as the private sector, and we'll be there with you. Thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, card has no name, from Scope and the Los Angeles Basin Solar Power, Green Energy, and Jobs Development Mandate.
That's me. Good morning. My name is Manuel Hernandez. I'm a community organizer with Scope. Scope has been leading an initiative through the LA Apollo Alliance with the city to take leadership and retrofit the existing city buildings by making them water and energy efficient, and to prioritize retrofits in the low-income communities of color and create jobs and training for LA residents. Putting solar panels on these buildings is part of a comprehensive solution. We support putting solar in LA and in locations where it is most advantageous. We support equity and prioritization of land and roofs located in low-income communities of color. We support workforce training and job creation, and the initiative is expected to create hundreds of direct and indirect good-paying jobs. We support a training academy that trains residents to install, operate, and maintain and repair solar power panels. We want to ensure that the city's low-income residents will have the opportunity for that training. We also support the training and use of current union workers to do the work of these new green jobs. We support innovative initiatives that bring new workers into the unionized workforce. Communities like South LA are communities that have been devastated by years of disinvestment and the mass exodus of many good-paying union manufacturing jobs. We support this initiative because of its potential to rebuild and revitalize our communities with new, good-paying jobs. A green job is a good job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maria Elena Doraz.
Great. Thank you. Good morning. On behalf and as Secretary-Treasurer of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, we are here to support the Green Energy and Good Jobs for Los Angeles Act. We think it's important, one, for the future generations to not have to depend on expensive and highly polluting forms of energy. We know that this act is also going to produce hundreds of good middle-class jobs in manufacturing, installing, and maintaining the solar energy facilities. It also establishes a jobs training and outreach academy, which we are going to actively participate in to make sure gets into those neighborhoods and the underserved neighborhoods throughout the city. It's part of what we as a labor movement believe very strongly in. Pollution from burning coal for electricity has contributed to so much air pollution and smog that is responsible for so many thousands of cases of lung disease, asthma, and deaths, and those are working class neighborhoods that we care about. So we believe this act is going to help us save lives by keeping our air clean. Over time, solar will be much cheaper than alternatives like coal and help reduce the need to construct expensive out-of-state transmission line. I urge your support to have this initiative, move this initiative, its placement on the March 09 ballot. We have an opportunity, one, to clean up the environment, and two, to create good middle-class jobs in Los Angeles. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jan Zielnik.
Good morning, council members. My name is John Zorolnik. I'm a senior policy analyst with the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy, and I'm also here today to speak in support of the Green Energy and Good Jobs for Los Angeles Act. I support it for all the reasons that you've just heard from others. The initiative will create good, family-supporting jobs with benefits, jobs that otherwise are going to go somewhere else. And the Jobs Training and Outreach Academy is also an essential piece. For the past 2 years, I've been focused on the Port of Los Angeles' Clean Trucks program, which is poised to simultaneously address environmental impacts and also improve economic conditions for workers. So this creative, innovative program at the port shows that not only is it possible to do both of these things at the same time, but that these two things naturally go together. At Lane, we've also been working intensely for the last 2 years on a construction careers campaign to ensure that construction jobs in LA go to working-class residents and that local hiring provisions are included. Most importantly, that these construction jobs are good middle-class jobs. Additionally, at Lane, we care about ensuring that we have healthy communities throughout LA. And we've already heard from others this morning about the bad impacts, the negative impacts of pollution from burning coal for electricity. So we hope that we can move forward today with this initiative and that Los Angeles will continue to be at the forefront of green energy. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Brian DRC. Okay. Mr. DRC. No? Brian DRC? All right. Marvin Krupke. Mr. Marvin Krupke. Aaron Green. Aaron Green?
Good morning. Aaron Green, Legislative Affairs Manager for VICA, Valley Industry and Commerce Association. I want to start by commending the Council for considering this act. I think that it is a landmark initiative, and as we've seen, there's nothing else like this proposal anywhere else in the country to put 400 megawatts of solar governed by a municipality, and this council is truly to be commended. I think, and I would also like to, though, echo the comments of Ron Gastelum. VICA's been working with the LA Chamber. There are a couple of points that I think are very important that council members need to consider before moving forward with placing this item on the March 09 ballot. And the first piece is the piece that Mr. Gastelum touched on, was that I think further analysis is needed. There are some issues of cost and how much this is going to impact the DWP's bottom line. We're not really sure the full extent of financing, as there has not been a final plan for implementation at this point, as well as how much per kilowatt hour the solar is actually going to cost. And I think until there is a final plan presented, further analysis needs to be conducted. And then last, one other, I think this is also a point of principle, is that in the language there are three words that are really important to recognize, and that is that the language contains recognized employee organization as the only organization, and only a single recognized employee organization can participate in the implementation of this plan. And as a principle, I don't know that the City Council wants to move forward with restrictive labor practices on a ballot initiative. So I think until further investigation, until a full plan is put forward, the Council may want to hold off on moving forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. William Luddy. William Luddy? Bill Luddy.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is William Luddy. I'm the Executive Director of the Carpenters Contractors Cooperation Committee. We represent the carpenter members of the Southwest Regional Council, 65,000 strong, and our signatory union contractors. I'm here in support of the concept of this motion for the green energy, the renewable energy which we need, and the jobs. But I would urge you to consider the amendment submitted by the Chamber, which we have worked in cooperation with, which would open this up to the work being done by the laborers who've spoken, our contractors, and other contractors to give the city the most competitive position, the best pricing, and the greatest opportunity for work to get this done. The way this is currently written, It moves forward too quickly. It does not provide the type of opportunities. It places unnecessary costs in requiring the department to develop a training facility when there are plenty of training facilities available. We have a facility in Los Angeles. Laborers have training facilities. There are other programs out there, and this unnecessarily narrows the scope of outreach and the ability to perform this work. So again, we would urge you to consider and act upon the amendments that have been submitted, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Marvin Krupke. Okay. Brian DRC.
Good morning. I just want to kind of quickly go through and debunk some of what I've heard so far. This is basically a very simple utility-owned generation ordinance. Heretofore, there has not been utility-owned solar anywhere until Addison did the exact same program in San Bernardino, Riverside County, and presented it to the Public Utility Commission. This proposal to put on the ballot, which remind everybody that this is to allow the people of Los Angeles to vote on whether or not they want to do this. This is about as democratic as it gets. This is utility-owned generation. And last time I looked, the Department of Water and Power, the recognized employee group is IBEW Local 18. And this is electrical work. So you don't need to be involved in the carpenters and laborers and the IBEW fighting over jurisdiction. That's pretty much nonsense at this point. But what we have is a unique opportunity to have a four-legged stool that creates jobs, brings manufacturing to Los Angeles, cleans our air, and fourthly, probably the most understated part of this program is that it allows the DWP to site solar in places where our load is actually creating a reliability issue on our system on the hottest days of the year. I think this is well thought out. We've worked on it for over a year, and we hope and urge that you will approve.
Thank you very much. One last call for Mr. Krupke, Marvin Krupke. All right, that'll close the public comment then. Mr. Garcetti, we will go back to you.
Thank you very much. I'll give some introductory comments for the first couple of minutes, and then I'll use the balance of my 6 minutes to start with some questions for our departments. First of all, thank you to everybody who is here, and it is an exciting day. It's nice to know that everybody agrees on the goals. There's always questions and good work to be done on getting to the goal. But I remember just a few years ago being in these chambers and talking about solar was a very lonely place to be. There weren't a lot of people who saw that yet. The crisis that we have in the environment wasn't as pronounced. And yet Los Angeles' roots are based in solar energy. As I shared in committee, I mean, right now this downtown doesn't even go north, south, east, west, but is tilted by 45 degrees because our original founders of the city knew the power of the sun and built green in our original pueblo, though the rest of it, once you get, as Tom Labange will remind us, out to Fountain in Vermont, it goes back to the regular grid. We have an intense need here to do better how we produce our power, how we get good jobs, how we encourage business to be here, just as DWP did at the beginning of our solar program, and we saw solar manufacturers come here, but we fell behind, and they began to, lo and behold, leave Los Angeles. This will do those things that have been discussed by each one of you. But I want to be clear about the intention of this as well, that there are three components of a successful solar program here in Los Angeles. That which we own and operate, which I know back when we started as a public utility, there were probably voices in Los Angeles that said we shouldn't be in that business, and yet the ratepayers of Los Angeles have been rewarded from having a public utility, which is cheaper in terms of the cost for power and for water, and we have been seeing also the importance of keeping those middle-class jobs here. But secondly, there is a role for the private sector, and that will always continue to be important here for us in Los Angeles. We are committed to that, and I think you're going to hear that with DWP. We talked about that in committee, and those of us who have been talking about solar installers, with folks from the chamber, with people who are from other represented unions that do some of the installation work for parts of this. That is going to be a critical part of our success, and this is not an either or. It's a yes and today. It's a yes and. And then the third component, which has to do with the private sector, is also the residential program, which is near and dear, I think, to this council's heart as well. Because for people to participate, to know in their homes that they're putting power right back in from the sun on their rooftops, as a number of council members here have done, as many of our constituents have done, that is a critical piece as well for our success. So this is only one piece of it. Again, it is not an either or. It does not cut out those possibilities. And I want to hear articulated from the department that they will be able to do that aggressively as part of our overall effort to get to 20% by 2010 renewable energy and to go beyond that to 30% shortly thereafter. So a couple points I would make, and then I'm going to ask if the department can come forward, our CLA and the mayor's office. And I see we have our general manager, Mr. Nahai, if you'd maybe like to come forward as well. And I'd like to ask you some questions. But in our time of looking at what we can do here, this would be the most aggressive solar program this country has ever seen. We're able to, 3 years ago we were talking about 1% of our power being solar generated. This would be 3 times over that. And to me that is extremely exciting. And what's more, if we look at the technology used to convert sun's power into usable electricity, it won't be located in some faraway solar plant, but that piece about reliability is critical. As we've seen the brownouts, as we've seen some of our reliability at peak time, that is when solar kicks in and is our most effective. But let me start, and do we have a representative from the mayor's office? Deputy Mayor Sutley, if I may ask you to come forward too as well. Let me ask these questions first to the department though. And if you'll hold my time, the first question is, how does this plan fit into your goal overall of reaching 20% renewable power by 2010, Mr. Nahai?
This plan stretches beyond 2010. I think as has been most recently discussed, this would go to 2014. But certainly, as we ramp up in 2009, it will contribute to the 20% by 2010, but it will have a more significant impact to the 35% by 2020 objective.
And in your report, you talked about a phase-in schedule that would go now from 2009 to 2013 of 50 megawatts in 2010, 75, 75, then 100 and 100. Is that, based on our conversations, what you feel is the goals you can now achieve? Because we all want to be as ambitious as we can be, but we want it to be in a way that's accountable so that by 2013 we actually hit the benchmarks that we want. Could you discuss that plan a little?
Yeah, the latest conversations as of last night and this morning would provide the additional flexibility of stretching to 2014, which is very, very welcome for the department. But the careful ramping up, which would be 50 megawatts actually by the end of 2010 to begin with, would I think.
So I was off a year there, but I was just looking at your report here. So it's actually 2010 would be 50,
right?
And then
2010, 75. 50, and then
it goes to 2014.
Going up beyond that. Yep.
Okay. All right. I want to be clear about that. So is that your recommendation to the council as this is drafted, to actually have 50 megawatts in 2009, 75 in 2010, 75 in 11 and 12, 113 and 114?
Yes.
Okay. Walk us through some of the costs of this, of both how it will be funded and some of the arguments that have been made that we can do this more cheaply if we don't do it in-house. What are some of those advantages? What is the cost, and how would we pay for this?
Okay. I think we have to weigh all of the advantages of the program as proposed on one side of the scale, and take a look at some of the drawbacks on the other. On the advantage side of the scale, there is the fact that this will be renewable energy being generated by DWP. It's owned by the department. The department has as its model the ownership of generation facilities, transmission facilities, distribution facilities. It fits in with that model, which has really been to the benefit of the city for the last 100 years. There are training components to it. There are jobs that will be provided. The improvements will provide an economic engine for the city at a time when it's greatly needed, and this program is going to really put us in a leadership position in the world as far as solar
Agreed
is
on that.
concerned.
So the nuts and bolts of how we pay for it and what do you think it will cost? Can you walk us through that? The ratepayers obviously are looking at all sorts of renewable sources of energy. This obviously could be compared to wind. It could be compared to contracts we buy on the open market. Where's that cost differential, and how do we pay for it if we do this in-house?
Certainly. I think the other thing to remember is that with respect to this program, we won't need to build transmission. We'll have the power right here, and transmission, as you know, is becoming more and more of a challenge as all utilities try to access a renewable. So that's another factor to take into account. The cost, as we reported to the Rules Committee, will be either 1.5 billion at the lower end of the scale, up to 3 billion, and possibly beyond that. However, the $3 billion figure assumes $7.50 per watt as the installation cost. It doesn't take into account tax credits. And now this whole program is still evolving. We're still continuing to discuss how best to do this in the most cost-effective way. As I said, the most recent conversation has resulted in an agreement to go to 6 years rather than 5 years. That's where the 2014 figure comes from. The figure also assumes that we're not going to see prices come down, which everybody expects will occur, especially as we access economies of scale and other efficiencies as we start to move into this market in such a strong way. Most importantly, tax credits. We've been talking about mechanisms to ensure that we can access tax credits, which will bring the price down by 50%, down to around the $1.5 billion level. So those are the considerations.
Okay. Can you, and possibly Deputy Mayor, chat a little bit about the arguments that have been made in terms of what this does to the private marketplace here in Los Angeles, both the private marketplace where people would install themselves, or that you possibly would have purchase agreements with private installers. Is that still something that you plan to do? I know that you allude in your responses to the council in terms of your overall solar plan, that will be coming out in the next few weeks. But for me, we obviously have time between now and the final vote, but the assurances both in the mayor's policy moving forward and DWP's policy moving forward, that is a critical component, I think would address many of the criticisms that have been put forward and certainly many of the questions the council would have as well.
Right. If I may, I'll comment first, and then I'm sure Deputy Mayor Sutley will add to this. This program does not in any way impact the SB1 program, so that will continue. And indeed, as I indicated before the Rules Committee, this is a precursor to a larger solar vision for the city, one that will incorporate feed-in tariffs, co-ops, and other mechanisms to expand the use of this bountiful fuel in the city, and we anticipate the announcement of those programs in the coming weeks. So it is certainly my hope that this DWP program would exist side by side with the private sector to the benefit of the city, and that we'll have the city thrive as a result.
Thank you. And Nancy Sutley, Deputy Mayor. Just to reiterate what the General Manager said, the Mayor asked DWP to put together a comprehensive solar plan, I think to further the goals, as you stated, to make Los Angeles a leader in solar power. This is what we're considering, or what's before you today, is an extremely important part of that, and there are other pieces of that will take advantage of all of the other kinds of structures out there in the market for the private sector to develop solar in the city. We think this is as an overall package will be very beneficial to the city, and committed to move forward with that. Thank you.
So I'm certainly interested in working on that piece, but I've the word that the mayor and our general manager here will not just that things like SB1 won't be affected by this, but this will be some of the policy that we will see moving forward. That while we have this big piece, which is, I think, the largest chunk and the most exciting one in many ways, we're not going to dry up the marketplace, because the sort of green market that we want to see here. And part of this, which we haven't talked much about, but which has been near and dear to my heart, is the tax breaks for those manufacturers that will locate here in Los Angeles. I'd like to see us waive that gross receipts tax for a period of 10 or 20 years. Not something that is unwound, but something where they get real credit and incentive to be in the city of Los Angeles. That is something that will move forward, those policies, both from the mayor and from DWP?
Yes, indeed. I mean, I've always said that we want to throw open the doors to the private sector for renewables, for solar, for green energy, for energy efficiency. The fact that we're proceeding at this point with this program is not at all intended to leave the impression that the entire asset is going to be, gobbled up by the public sector. And this is why in the coming weeks we're also going to roll out additional programs which will be to the benefit of the private sector. And in SB1, the SB1 program has its limitations because the power can be used only on the facility upon which it's located. And I think we need to change that paradigm so that we can truly make much more use of this fuel that we have here in such plenty.
I'll press my button again. Did you want to say something?
Just to add that I think that we would certainly be very interested in working with council on the local manufacturing piece. I think it's very important to support the green economy here in Los Angeles and create jobs here. But as the general manager said, trying to find all of the ways that we can encourage the development of solar in the city, in addition to the DWP component of it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My last question, then I'll press my button again. I want to thank also Ms. Perry, our chair, Ms. Gruhl, our president pro tem, for co-introducing this, the work of the mayor, the environmental community, the labor community, and the business community. The $1.5 to $3 billion question, though, can you just lay out, before I come back, why the taxpayer, the ratepayer, should get behind this? What is the support? Why do it this way? Why is it in their interest when arguments have been made that they should, look at a different way of doing this?
Well, the ordinance itself is still evolving. We're still talking about the mechanisms to try to bring the price down as much as possible. The interests of the ratepayers are always foremost when we do these calculations. So we want to try every possible way to bring the price down as much as is possible, and to ameliorate rate impacts as much as possible. But this will go before the people of Los Angeles for a vote, and they'll be able to weigh the pros and cons of it and decide whether they want to go forward with this. I can tell you for myself as an Angelino, I believe that the advantages of doing this, the self-sufficiency, the reliability, our ability to provide for peaking as we see different patterns of energy use in the city. We just had one of the warmest Octobers on record. In September, we had peak records broken 3 or 4 times. And solar is the perfect power to deal with peaking as it occurs. And as I said, it provides us with self-sufficiency. It's LA-owned generation. It'll produce jobs. It'll be a great shot in the arm for the city as far as economic impetus is concerned. It has all of those advantages going for it. And I believe that we can do this in such a way that it'll proceed side by side with the private sector to make solar truly a significant part of our energy mix in this city, which it really should have been done a long time ago. By doing this, I think we'll contribute to economies of scale. We'll contribute to the price coming down. And there are right now so much that is happening in so many innovations, getting away from silicon, for instance, as the basic component of the technology, and it's silicon which makes it so expensive. So we should weigh into the marketplace. We should encourage innovation and creativity. This is a very significant step in that direction.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Garcetti. Our next speaker is Ms. Gruhl, followed by Mr. Smith, Mr. Labange, Mr. Alarcon, and Ms. Hahn.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Garcetti. You outlined some of the questions I was going to ask too, so I hope not to be duplicative in my questions or comments. And I think that I was proud to sign on with my colleagues, Mr. Garcetti and Ms. Perry, and many others here on the Council. And I'm pleased to see the numbers change that had been, as discussed in the Rules Committee, the on-ramp and the off-ramp. And so had heard there was some recognition or understanding about a longer length of time, as well as the, as I had in my notes, the 50 megawatts in 2010 and going forward, excuse me, to 2014. I think that when we look at the ambitious goals that the DWP has set, which we all agree are ambitious and the right thing to do, which is 20% by 2010 and 35% by 2020, that looking at our, and we've had this in Ms. Perry's committee and E&E, is the importance of where we're going to get that energy from. And the concern, as I was talking with the Chamber the other day, was we are dependent a lot on others to give us this renewable energy. We have not created our own renewable energy here. And so when we look at cost prices and fluctuation and demand, and I think as Mr. Garcetti mentioned as well, the history of the DWP, albeit criticized sometimes many, many years ago, was to own its own assets and to be able to control those own assets. And I think this fits in that category, as well as having a balance, which you've indicated, of public and private sector aspect of this. Because as I heard you describe, Mr. Nahai, that there would still be SB1, there would be SOPA agreements, all kinds of things that would occur that would complement or be, equal to, in essence, the program that is being established, as we've talked about today. And I think that we understand that to go forward, this is, as I understand, 3%. If we reach that 400 megawatts, it's 3% of the overall renewable energy that we have set our goals to achieve. Is that correct?
It would be 3% of our power for the city.
And I think that the importance of this is 400 of potentially a 900, correct, capacity, as we've talked about.
750, 800, some would say 900.
Somewhere in between that number. And even with, if we look at some of the numbers, I think were in your report, reflect where we had both looking at housing authority, excluding, I think even the chamber staff mentioned when we were there the other day, that just with existing building, excluding DWP Airport and Harbor, there was 80 megawatts just there in that area. Is that fairly accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
And so I think that I believe that it is an aggressive goal to do this, but it is one in which, when you look at just even our city buildings, much less looking at some of the larger buildings in the city of Los Angeles. And I believe that all of the incentives, and what I heard from the Chamber and their members, was the importance of ensuring that the existing incentives were there. And that the SOPA agreements would still exist in this broader overall kind of renewable energy plan. Is that, I'm looking at both Mayor's Office and DWP.
Yes.
And, excuse me, I think what has been talked about that, creating jobs as well as creating a renewable energy in the city, and a dependable renewable energy is one in which is not inconsistent with what we have adopted in the past. Is that correct?
It's totally consistent with the direction that we're going in.
And I did not hear, your response on, I think Mr. Garcetti asked you about some of the amendments that were proposed and the department's kind of opinion on that.
Well, as I say, the ordinance itself is continuing to evolve. There are conversations that are happening between the mayor's staff, the project proponents, LADWP representatives, and those conversations are very encouraging because they provide additional flexibility. I think all of us recognize that we must succeed. And while we must be courageous and aggressive and ambitious, we must at the same time make sure that the program is a success at the end of the day. And I think in good faith, all of the parties at the table are recognizing that and are moving forward in a very positive direction.
and I think, and Ms. Perry's been a big advocate that's on the, and I'm assuming because I was a maker, I'm taking a little more extra time, but is the importance of our, she smiles at me, the importance of our ratepayers and ensuring that they understand what this means to them, because we did include in the past appropriations that the Commission adopted as well as the City Council, the importance of renewable energy. And maybe you can talk about the ECAF. And I know it's a little technical, but for people out there that the whole idea is, again, we have to, by law and by our own goals, have this renewable energy as part of our portfolio. So what we're talking about today is a combination of public and private sector will be part of what the DWP is operating under. And for the ratepayers to understand that when we adopted this several months ago, as far as the overall rate structure, there was an understanding that whether we purchased it from outside the city of Los Angeles, which are jobs that don't come to us, or inside the city of Los Angeles, that it was going to be a little more costly generally for renewable energy. The hope is over long term it won't be so costly because there will be a much greater availability of that. But right now there's a high demand and not as much renewable energy that we would like to see in this country, and particularly in the city. So if you could just real quickly explain the whole issue for our ratepayers and their understanding of that.
Let me make a couple of points very quickly. I think some people think that the environmental direction that DWP is going in is a matter of a luxury. It isn't. It's a matter of statutory necessity. Laws such as AB 32, SB 1368 are not going to allow us to remain a coal-dominated utility. So our move towards renewables is something that's mandated. If we don't do that, we will be heavily penalized, either in a cap-and-trade scheme or a carbon tax regimen or things of that sort. So yes, we're moving in an environmental direction, but we have to move in an environmental direction. And doing this will mean that that we will actually end up saving a great deal of money, while at the same time cutting our greenhouse gas emissions, and while at the same time producing jobs and having an economy that actually thrives as a result of this new direction.
I like the part of that we're actually going to save money over time, and that's important as we look long term on our environmental goals and how we're providing energy to our residents.
Well, you made a very profound point. You said that there may have been at some point criticism because LADWP wanted to own its own assets. But the deregulation experience shows us that was an investment that was well worth making. And now as we look back on it, the model of owning our own resources turns out to have been a very, very wise one, even though we had to buy the plants, build the plants, staff the plants, have people there all of the time, rather than simply buying energy. So this model is wholly consistent with that. And I believe years from now, as other generations of Angelenos look back on this investment, they will judge it to have been one well worth making. And as you said, the intent here is not to close the door on private industry at all. As a matter of fact, what we will do here is going to rejuvenate the solar industry. It's going to cause a great deal of activity. It's going to spur more innovation. And as far as impacts on rates are concerned, we've started to model all of these various scenarios. Every single plan that we're looking at has as its foremost objective to have the least possible impact on our ratepayers, especially at this time. And so the reason why this additional flexibility that we're talking about right now, being able to access tax credit, stretching the program out a little bit longer, giving us more time to do the necessary planning in the first year or so in order to meet the first benchmark. This is crucial because it will enable us to do exactly that, to put plans in place to make sure that we have the least possible impact on our ratepayers.
And the other point, and I will end because I'll be close to my 6 minutes here, but is the importance of diversifying, just like in the marketplace and your investments, is both owning these assets and having the private sector as part of this. And so I think that is, as someone who comes from private sector experience, the importance of that, of having both. Thank you, Mr. Zine.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Smith, followed by Mr. LaBonge.
Thank you, Mr. President. And some of this ground has been covered. I have just three questions I want to ask you. And I apologize, I didn't hear Mr. Garcetti's opening statement. He may have covered these, so if I'm repetitive, I apologize. First, I have a concern in dealing with the achievability of 400 megawatts in 4 years. And I saw in the CLA's report that they're suggesting some flexibility, that we have the ability, if we can't achieve it for economic reasons, for marketplace reasons, that we have flexibility to adjust that number to a realistic point. Is that language going to be in this presentation, or is that only suggested by the CLA so far? Hold my time.
Well, coming out of committee, that language was it is part of the recommendation to the council for the instruction to draft. So there will be flexibility to modify the program. It has to do with availability of materials, rooftop space, et cetera, et cetera. So our intent is to bring back language that does provide that flexibility.
And I appreciate that. I want you to know that Mr. Garcetti and I are the only two members that actually put solar roofs on our homes. Mr. Rosenthal's talking about doing it next year. But when I did my solar roof this last summer, I had to wait 3 months to get all the panels because the availability in the marketplace was so constricted. I have talked to some of the manufacturers recently, Kyocera for one, who said we're opening a new plant. But they're opening a plant in Mexico. That is not an economic model that we want to achieve or strive to achieve. And so I want to make sure that the marketplace can bear the ability for us to buy in a timely way these items, but also to create those jobs in the United States of America, here in Los Angeles, if possible. And so I want us to stress very hardly that we're going to try and buy those. I have a solar panel plant in my district that we want to try locally first. This should be our first priority, and where we can then create those plants. I have a motion number 39 that's coming up that will actually give the city the ability to make deals, which we don't currently have because of our charter. And so you're going to have an opportunity, Council, in just a few minutes to fix some of this by saying to these solar companies, we want to buy your product, but if you don't build your plant here in L.A., we're not going to buy you first. And so I want those flexibilities in there.
Well, let me just give you this assurance, Council Member. There is language in the ordinance itself which calls for bid preferences for local manufacturers. So it's very much our hope that that in and of itself will bring a lot of business into the city, established here in the city, employing Angelinos, and DWP will help that process along by providing them with bid preferences. And as far as the market catching up is concerned, again, this flexibility that we're now building into the program so that the first 50 megawatts doesn't have to be in place until the end of 2010 will also enable us to lay the groundwork to make sure that the deliveries are made in order to meet the benchmarks.
Very good. The second issue of my concern is, again, flexibility in the way of rates. We've had this discussion actually last couple months ago about the fact that solar costs more, that geothermal costs more, that all the options on the table for RPS requirements cost more. And at some point, we're going to get to the overload factor that we're reducing the amount of energy being created through our own system, and that's what I think you're fixing here, but the cost factor gets spread to the ratepayers sooner or later, that the cost of doing this has to be borne by the ratepayers. And I want, for a purpose of clarity and open government, that whatever we take to the ballot has a very strong statement in there that we assume there will be increases to the ratepayers at some time in the future, without putting a dollar amount maybe on it at this time, but we have to be honest with the ratepayers to say, we are required to do this, as you just well explained, but there is a cost factor to doing it, and that has to be in the ballot.
I couldn't agree with you more. We must be absolutely honest with the ratepayers on the ballot so that they make an informed decision and not feel at any time that they were misled on this issue. But may I point out just one other thing, though? As we look to the future, coal is not going to be the price that it is today. Yeah. Cap and trade, a carbon tax. These mechanisms are going to make sure that the price of coal is not going to remain as it is today. And so we have to plan for that future. People talk about carbon sequestration. Well, just at one of our coal plants that we've been looking at, it would cost $3 billion to do the carbon sequestration for a technology that yet is unproven. So aren't we better off investing in renewable energy that is proven, that is tested, that we know will deliver the power? Aren't we better off investing in Los Angeles, than taking risks, perhaps, with the technology that's going to cost a great deal to implement anyway. So those are the kinds of calculations that we make.
Yeah, and I totally concur with you that solar is the best option on the table. There's only two proven technologies in the world that really produce the amount of quantities we want. One is solar, and the other is terrestrial energy, which we're going to be talking about early next year. And that is, it comes in at a cost factor well below what we're talking about here. We'll have that conversation next year, though. Finally, my last issue is something that is in the page 3 report, Mr. Miller, and it talks about employment requirements. And I totally agree with the first portion where it says that the solar program shall be the property of Department of Water and Power. Therefore, and here's where my concern is, that the work shall be completed by DWP employees. There's not a relationship to that statement. Here's my concern. One is that there is opportunities out there in that Local 18 of the IBEW has been training employees with their training program for the past year in solar installations. We have not been doing that at Water and Power, have we?
We have some capability, but there's a great deal more that we can and must be doing. But no, we've got workers at local 18 and local 11 that can do this work.
Okay. So I believe, and I'm going to offer an amendment shortly that will say that we shall not choose DWP employees as our first choice because there are trained people out there doing it now, but it should be our second choice. And there's for a lot of reasons. One, you're going into a huge capital program that we authorized last year that's going to require, 1,000 employees to do the infrastructure rollout over the next 7-8 years. So you're trying to hire people now. To add an additional burden to hire people to do solar roof installations, I think is foolhardy at this time. Secondly, and as I want to state, it is more costly for us to do it that way because you're hiring for a short-term program with a long-term impact. You hire people now for a 4 or 5 year, 6 year program. Now they're on the payroll. You don't just drop them off the payroll like you can at the hiring hall or that you can for private contractors. Now you've got a pension issue. You've built up Water and Power employees unnecessarily for a short-term program, which really is against city policy. And Mr. Miller, we have a policy on hiring short-term employees that says we don't do that. Now, that does not extend to Water and Power. We've asked you to adopt those policies, but you haven't yet. And so I think it runs counterintuitive to our policy here that the council's adopted for other city departments that we do not hire for short-term hiring purposes. And I'm very concerned about your long-range plans. And so I would offer an amendment that says that we shall choose to hire employees from the hiring hall, which are union employees, they're IBW mostly, they're union certified employees. We meet all the goals of our living wage requirements. And that secondly, we look to the private sector, where there are many certified, and we can certify them to be union jobs, living wage jobs, that have trained employees, and that our third choice then would be to hire DWP employees to fill those gaps where we can't get it from those other sources. And just for the reasons I explained, that it's economically more sensible. 2, it violates our city policy if we're hiring just for short term. And 3, we already got a large segment of people out there that are trained in this industry that we should be utilizing. So, members of the council, I'm going to be offering that amendment. I don't know if anyone wants to second that now.
Is there a second?
Pardon me?
Is there a second to that?
Thank you for discussion purposes, and I'll get that language circulated. But when you're looking at hiring right now, how many people are we hiring for the infrastructure program?
And Mr. Smith,
I'm over.
You're over. And if this could be your last question, press your button again.
How many people are we hiring for the long-term infrastructure program?
Well, I think around 1,000 is around the correct figure.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Labange.
Remember, Mr. Smith, a good point there, because a lot of the great people who get promoted out of city service up to water power then leave us strained because we can't meet our obligations in other areas. You are hiring people right now, right, David?
We are.
You're hiring for the city family, right?
We are.
And that sometimes is a strain on the city family. So if they're qualified people and they're union people and they're coming from a hall, that doesn't matter to you, does it?
Well, I think that this is a conversation we need to sit down and have.
I understand, but we're losing it here because if you have a situation there that is the goal of every employee to try to work for what is a great agency in power. So it's a problem. So I think Mr. Smith has a point. I don't want to argue that with you. I just want to bring it up now because I know it's a problem. I want street lighting to go to water and power. It's all the same power, you know. I don't. Maybe we need a charter amendment for that, Mr. Miller, real soon, because I think we could do a better job collectively with you leading the way and DWP leading the way. What are the liabilities to the people of Los Angeles with this initiative? Hold my time.
I think the downsides are very few. The panels require little in the way of maintenance. For the most part, they just need to be washed once a year. And so I don't see that there are many, in terms of legal liabilities to the city of Los Angeles.
Who washes them once a year?
It could be DWP personnel or Local 11 personnel who could go and do it. Or if a financial institution becomes the owner of the panels in order to secure tax credits, for instance, arrangements would have to be made with that institution to make sure that they're washed and maintained.
And has any of this been reviewed by the planning department on roofs and the architecture challenge that is there? What is going on in that? Was there been any discussions there? Because you're putting something on a roof.
Well, but we're putting stuff on roofs, all the time. I know that at some point there were
But there's more
discussions.
historic districts all over the place, and there's loads on the roofs, and I just wanted to ask the question. Has anybody talked to the planning department, the building department? How does it relate to HPOZs, or can this be done in the months ahead to look at?
Yes, well, I think certainly the entire city family would have to get together and decide how we best do this. It won't be suitable for every single building. I looked into putting solar on my house, for instance, and was told that I couldn't do it because I live in a canyon. So we have to find roofs that are suitable, that are going to meet the weight requirements.
If you live in a canyon, you're not going to get the sun enough of the time to be
I just don't get enough sun for it to.
Do animals affect these panels at all in the hillside area, in the canyon area, Santa Monica Mountains area?
I don't have any information on that, Councilman.
Okay.
I haven't heard of it.
And also, is there a switch that, let's say, it's dark for 2 weeks, heavy rains, and there's no sun, which has happened occasionally in Los Angeles, not too often. It happened in 1969. We were in high school. You were studying. I was probably out there playing in the rain. Is there a switch in the home that could say I'm still on the city's power grid, or I'm on the solar power grid at home? Is there any switch? Or once you go all the way?
No. Once if there isn't power being produced by the solar panel, there's not power coming from the solar panel. That doesn't mean that the house won't have power.
For that.
Otherwise.
Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to say there's a lot in the future that we don't know about that is going to have to happen fast to be able to correct the environment that we've been so reliant on. And the Department of Water and Power has always been in the forefront of trying to lead the way. Now it's going to lead the way again. So I support Mr. Garcetti and this effort here and others for this. But we've got to get the questions answered. And I would ask one thing, too, because I read your report. The situation of having citizen involvement here, where the industry and citizens have a seat at the planning table, I think you could really have an opportunity now, and you were the first agency to do it, reach out to neighborhood councils and say, I want you to be a green liaison for DWB in some way, and say, look, this is a point. I met with my neighborhood councils this morning, and maybe make a friendly amendment. Ms. Hahn, is that all you seconded? That they include the neighborhood councils in this earliest and appoint someone who's a green person, a DWP person, so that we can advance the call, because there's many questions that will come up, because this is new to a lot of people. We may be familiar with these concepts, but not everyone is familiar. We need the support of the community and the neighborhood councils. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Nahai.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Sutley, thank you. They want you still in France.
Thank you, Mr. Labange. Our next speaker is Mr. Alarcon.
Members, we're having an interesting discussion here because this is a very complicated measure. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to fully understand and analyze this proposal, quite frankly. So we have to make a decision on whether to send this forward to the voters and allow the debate to occur in the election process, or to not send forward one of the most aggressive opportunities to extend alternative use of alternative energy in Los Angeles. And frankly, that's where I fall. I I understand that 400 megawatts pretty much saturates all parts of Los Angeles. It's a huge commitment. Maximum capacity would be about 750 megawatts, but it's not likely that we'll get far beyond 400 megawatts. One of my concerns is on the contracting element. I'm concerned about how quickly we can grow our DWP employees to be able to conduct all this work. I'm assuming that we're going to have to go and contract on the private side, and that private side work would adhere to the memorandums of understanding, but not necessarily be tied specifically to electrician. So those contracts could include other classifications of workers, and could be theoretically negotiated to be lower than the cost of Department of Water and Power employees. I am concerned about the federal investment credits that DWP is not eligible to receive, and I believe the department is going to be compelled to go to the private side in order to gain the investment credits. And so I'm concerned about the dynamic there. The bottom line is that I believe this program is a major commitment to move us forward in alternative energy. At the same time, it can compel others to do so as well. I will support it, as I supported my seatmate Kevin Murray when we were in the Senate and he wrote SB 1. I encourage people to take advantage of this. I don't want us I'm concerned that the costs of the DWP's project might not be competitive in the marketplace. We have to be careful so that we can be competitive and spread the wealth. And I think one of the ways to do that is to ensure that we have a balanced program of not only just utilizing DWP employees, but also contracting out effectively and establishing good agreements with outside sources to be able to do even more than 400 megawatts if we have the opportunity. So I will support this. I believe that we're going to learn much more as the project is debated in the public sphere, but if we fail to put this on the ballot, then we lose all opportunity to expand from DWP's perspective, and I think that would be a worse problem than to not have the opportunity to vet it out in the election process.
Thank you, Mr. Alarcon. Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I rise to support the concept of this. It's absolutely, I believe, the direction we should be going in. And I love the ideas that this will provide reliable power in areas where our load has been less than reliable. I love the fact that this is about more jobs, more good-paying jobs for electricians. I love the fact that there is local hire with this. I think this is an opportunity for us to sort of do the right thing, have good green technology, provide jobs, and also I was talking to some of my friends in the audience who talked about we'll have an opportunity to hire locally for these new jobs. And hopefully this is an opportunity like we're always talking about. There's a lot of young people in Los Angeles, a lot of young people who are not going to college. There's a lot of young people who are at risk. And hopefully that will be a piece of this, that we're going to reach out and be able to train young people, give them good skills, and ultimately put them on the path to a good-paying job, that will lead to a career, a good career as an electrician. So those things I am very, very supportive. And one of the things we haven't talked enough about this morning is this is going to, in a small way, help us to ultimately reduce our dependence on foreign oil. I think that's something we've always got to look at and look at, how we generate power in this country and how we can lessen our dependence on that. I think there's probably some people watching this saying, okay, this is a great idea. This is the right thing to do. It's on city-owned buildings. Why can't we just do this? Why do we have to take this to the ballot? Or maybe Jerry can answer that. Hold my time, please.
Well, again, you don't, you could do it without going to the ballot, but this also does not limit this to city-owned buildings. There are also provisions to work with private property owners to lease the space. And in fact, I think that will be essential to reach the kinds of levels that need to be reached.
Could we do this now?
If the board were to take an action in adopting an ordinance and sending it to council for concurrence, you could do it without going on the ballot.
But the ballot measure gives us what more authority, or what more accountability, or what does having the people of Los Angeles vote on this do?
Well, again, I think certainly some of your colleagues can give some input on that as well. This program going through 2014 would extend beyond, again, some of the final terms of some of the council members. We're talking about continuity. It's been expressed that this would represent buy-in from the public on investing in solar and investing in it in basin. But that's clearly one of the decisions that I think that collectively you need to make is the importance of going on the ballot rather than doing it.
Power to the people to mandate that this be our policy. Here's my other issue. So this is going to involve the harbor. It's going to involve the airport. I know the harbor is already embarking on a solar project. 10 megawatts.
10
megawatts. Are we coordinating with that, or is that part of this? Or
Oh, well, very much so. Those are conversations that are ongoing between DWP and the harbor in order to realize that objective at the port.
Here's the other thing. I know Bill Rosendahl and I are very interested in modernizing the airport. Bill and I have just looked at the new architectural plans for modernizing the Tom Bradley International Terminal, as well as building a whole new midfield concourse. From what I saw, it didn't look like there was any discussion of potentially allowing those rooftops to accommodate solar panels. I'm worried that if we wait until March for the people to sort of mandate this, we will have put ourselves down a road, particularly with modernizing the airport, that we will not have planned to accommodate solar panels out there. And I think for those two entities, I think that's really important that they generate solar power. We know we're encouraging more cold ironing at the airport, as well as cold ironing at the port. I think those entities really need to have it, but I'm really worried by the design that I saw that it cannot accommodate solar panels. So I would really like for you to at least have discussions and whether or not we can begin to go down that road before March in at least preparing for the possibility of installing solar panels. The other thing, I agree with Tom LaBonge. I've always agreed that streetlights ought to be under DWP. I, of course, was with an investor-owned utility for many years, and streetlights were a part of what that company operated and installed. It really makes more sense. How can we get solar panels on our streetlights? That I think the average person out there looks at those streetlights and thinks, why can't we figure out how to connect solar to streetlights in the city of Los Angeles? Every time I pass a call box on the freeway, thank you, Kenny Hahn, but now, of course, they've got solar panels on all the call boxes. I think streetlights in Los Angeles should be connected to solar, and would like for that to be a part of maybe this mandate, not just flat buildings, but what about all the streetlights within the city of Los Angeles? I think, and what? Park lights, yeah. Thank you. I'd like to add that as a part of this overall plan.
Good.
I think we get more jobs by adding the streetlights.
In essence, if it's not feasible,
Okay,
do it in-
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn. Our next speaker is Mr. Reyes.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I want to thank all the parties that have been involved in getting us to this place. It's been a long time coming. But I need to understand what flexibility we have in looking at the ordinance. I know you spoke to it earlier. I see this language, ownership of solar power panel installation, power generated. And I'm not clear when we talk about measuring power and how it gets measured on the grid versus personal or private property, like all electric power generated pursuant to this program shall be owned by the department and shall be delivered directly to the department's electric system without first passing through the meter measuring the electric use by the host program participant. So, pardon my ignorance here, but how do you measure what's being produced? The solar panels are creating power. It's going into the grid, which is extra power that we need because our circuits are getting blown. You know, it's like Mr. D'Arcy was saying, the hottest parts of the city, we need this extra energy to cool down and enhance our system. But how are we measuring how much is being generated? Can someone explain that? And if it's in the ordinance, if it's not going to work or we need to improve it, because it is going to be voter approved in the ordinance, do we have any flexibility to change it or to alter? And I know there's always issues of interpretation, but I just want to understand, how tight this is or how flexible we are to make sure the system works.
Well, let me first observe that I believe what is before you today is the charter amendment. The ordinance itself is still evolving. There's still conversations that are happening. There's still additional flexibility that's being added, such as, for instance, going to 2014, which is a change that will ask to be made on the item in front of you. So the ordinance is continuing to be discussed, and there are revisions that are being made to it. But let
me ask you, and maybe interrupt you there for a second. So when does the ordinance come back, and when do we get to have a discussion on the ordinance with our staff and with all the folks who are the architects of making sure that this is a good program? How much time do we have for that?
Well, do you want to explain when, as I understand it, today the vote is on the charter amendment itself, but the ordinance will be coming back before the council?
Well, my understanding is a little bit different, and maybe the city attorney can clarify, but I think that a charter amendment will be required. But my understanding to date is that there would be a brief charter amendment that in essence gives the council the authority to direct the department to move forward with the program, and that an initiative or an ordinance would also be on the ballot amending the Muni Code that would provide the elements of the program you're discussing today. All of that is going to have to be approved by November 7th.
By November 7th?
Yes.
Okay, so did I hear you correctly? There might be a difference of opinion in terms of process?
I didn't hear a difference of opinion.
I don't believe there's a difference in opinion, no.
Okay.
There are going to be two things, a charter amendment and a referendum ordinance that would be on the ballot. The charter amendment would be brief. The referendum ordinance would include the elements of the proposal that you're discussing.
Okay, I just need clarity in process. That's Mr. Chevedia?
As Jerry has explained, yes, there's required to be a charter amendment to give this body the power to direct that certain things be done by water and power. Otherwise, they're an independent department. And then the ordinance would flesh out, which the voters would approve, would flesh out more of the details of the program itself that the department would carry out.
Okay, so how many chances we get a bite at the apple before we actually have to send it out? When's the point of no return?
I believe November 7th is the day that you actually approve whatever measure is going to go before the voters. Today you're debating whether or not you will instruct that we prepare something and what the substance of that something would be. And then we'll prepare it.
I believe the intent is to have the actual language here on Friday, which will give you, I think 3 meetings in which to review the language.
3 meetings? I don't want to sound ungrateful because I think there's a lot of good pieces in this, a lot of great goals, and if we can actually create jobs in the inner city and we actually create a way to generate power, it's a big plus. It's a long way from where we've been. But I think we should have the ability to understand what this ordinance is going to dictate and how it's going to impact our decision making and our abilities to leverage the great potential that this action has. So we're hoping that'll come back to us in time.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes. Mr. Rosendahl is our next speaker.
Thank you, Madam President. If it's all right on my time, I'd like to ask Brian Darcy to come up for a clarification point. Hold my time. Can we hold my time until he comes up?
And you can speak at the lectern, Mr. D'Arcy.
Okay.
I wanted to get back to Mr. Smith's point. For 40 years, we have dispatched journeyman wiremen and electrical helpers, which is a non-skilled worker who just works with a journeyman, as a daily rate exempt from civil service classification. And that's the way this will be done. The beauty of it is that it's a lower paid, so a lot of the work is helping the journeyman to hook up the panels. The way this, and it's an exempt worker, so they can be laid off and or fired pretty much without, except for a building trades type of grievance procedure. We would be able to use the recruitment issue, bring them in, they sign the books, they go through the training, they're supervised by a journeyman, and we can do this. In addition to that, this is IBEW jurisdiction on both that side and as contracting out. Whatever can't be done, in fact, Local 11's members sign our books and are dispatched directly to the utility. So there's two ways of doing it. It can be contracted out to NECA contractors, or it can be dispatched out of our union hall, and they would be IBEW members who come and sign our books from everywhere. But we would have the ability to go and recruit people from the underserved communities as our proposed ordinance would allow. We would have an opportunity to look at these people, put them through the kinds of life experience training that they need, so that we can fill at some point down the road. We got 40% of the employees are ready to retire, and we have 1,000 funded and unfilled vacancies at DWP currently. So this is one way of having a LA first hiring and do what we're supposed to do as Angelenos.
Thank you for that. I think it was important to hear from him, since, let's be clear about it, this is an initiative that Mr. D'Arcy and his leadership have put forward here that is dramatic and new. Secondly, I totally am excited about the voters participating in this process, and I hope we have a very healthy dialogue in the next few months about what this commits our constituents to. Okay, a couple of quick questions. I am a big believer in solar. Okay? My community wants to do solar too. They want to get 100 homeowners, and I want to be part of it. We have flat roofs. We love the government strategy. We want to get this done. We got to do it yesterday. Okay? So that's a no-brainer for me, frankly. How do we get my folks who want to form a collective and we want to put this stuff on our roofs? Can we get incentives? Can we get support? Will you at least, Mr. Nahai, meet with my community people and come up with a strategy where Mar Vista wants to be first from a private sector standpoint, from a homeowner standpoint, to put solar on our roofs?
I'd be delighted to meet with your community council member and to explore whether it's a co-op type of model or a virtual share type of model, or in fact trying to bring the community under the rubric of this program. We're open to all of those possibilities, and incentives are going to be a very important part of this program, because as far as private sector contributors are concerned, it's a voluntary program. So we can't make people give us their roofs, so we're going to have to offer a set of incentives to make sure that that happens.
Okay. I want to set that up rather quickly, because I want to get this process going, because they're totally committed, and I am too, on our flat roofs in sunny Southern California, to have the private sector step up, the homeowner group step up, the neighborhood councils. Mar Vista Neighborhood Council is totally engaged in this issue as well. We need incentives, and we need a collective spirit. If I can say, here are 100 homes, flat roofs, we want to do it, how do we do it? And we want to make sure that the IBEW is involved with us too, because we want to make sure these people get living wages and get benefit packages as well. I look forward to that meeting. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Mr. Huizar.
Thank you, Madam President. And as has been stated often here today, there's no doubt that we need to get away from coal, that we need to find more sustainable forms of energy for not only our city but our country. But given that this is only about 1 to 3% of reaching our 20% goal by 2010, have we compared how much this cost us compared to other forms of alternative energy, such as geothermal or wind? And how does this compare to those other sources of energy to get to our 20% goal? Hold my time, please.
Traditional photovoltaic technology is without a doubt much, much more expensive than other forms of energy, if judged just on a per unit basis. But that cannot be the only criteria for comparison, as you know. In this case, the fact that we don't have to build the transmission to bring the power home, the fact that we're going to have positive economic impacts here, that we're going to produce jobs, that we're going to have training, that we're going to have PV or other solar generating manufacturers come to Los Angeles to set up shop here because we'll provide them with bid preferences under this program. The fact that we'll own this generation, that we'll control it. All of those issues also come into the mix. And finally, it's a matter of balance. This will provide us with the peaking energy that it appears we're going to certainly need in the future, and it contributes to system reliability as well. So,
have we done that analysis? A comparison between, well, how do we intend to reach our 20% goal? I mean, have we done our analysis to say if we go this route, certain percentage wind, certain percentage solar, certain percentage steel? Do we have a plan?
Oh, yes.
We have a plan. How are we allocating amongst our plan the different sources that we will use?
Oh,
I'll
provide you with that. No, but I tell you, with respect to 20% by 2010, we anticipate about 56% of that will be wind. Solar will not play by 2010 a significant role. This has much more of an impact on.
Does this cost more than wind?
Yes, it does.
And so why?
At the present time. At the present time. But by the time we access tax credits and do economies of scale, because we're going to be doing it on a large scale basis, and anticipating that in the future there'll be innovations and improvements in the technology that will bring the price down from what it is now. Everybody anticipates that that'll happen. With those considerations, it starts to come within striking distance, although certainly not as inexpensive as wind or geothermal.
If you could forward to my office and perhaps the other council offices that analysis as to different costs between going one route or another and what that means. And finally, my other concern or question evolves around our ratepayers. I think Mr. Smith made it very clear that before, or certainly, Mr. Smith brought up the issue that our ratepayers need to know what they're voting for and be very clear about it. I certainly would want to know that information before we vote to put this on the ballot. As you know, we had a long discussion this past year about increases in fees for our ratepayers, and one of my concerns was low-income ratepayers, and given everything else that's going on in this world with inflation, et cetera, we certainly would want to see how this will affect our ratepayers, and particularly our low-income ratepayers. So that needs to be very clear and transparent. I know we're letting the voters decide, but certainly I would want to have that information even before we vote to put this on the ballot. If you could please provide that to us. And my last question is, Ms. Hahn asked why ballot and not just have the board vote and then have it come to council. Well, why are we going this direction?
Well, again, that is a policy issue that this body collectively needs to decide. As I indicated, you can, with an action of the board, the council could adopt an ordinance implementing this plan. As has been expressed by some of your colleagues, the desire to have this locked in for a longer period of time, to have certainty, to have public buy-in. Those are the sorts of public policy discussions that I think this body needs to have to make the determination about whether to put this on the ballot.
Okay. Well, thank you. I could just finally state that what we're facing here today is the fact that everyone says they want to go green, everyone wants alternative sources of energy, and certainly we have to do that. But we all have to realize that it's going to cost more. But as we go in that direction, I certainly want to make sure that we're doing everything possible that that it is not costing us more than it has to. It certainly is going to cost us more. It's something that most people have not realized. We do want cleaner air. We do want to slow down global warming, but it's going to cost more, but we certainly want to make sure that we're doing everything possible that it's not costing us more than it has to, and that's the type of analysis I think we need to see before we move forward with this. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huizar. Our next speaker for the first time will be Mr. Zine, followed by Mr. Wesson.
Thank you. The question I have regarding the employment, yesterday I met with an individual from Hometown Industries. Are they in line to receive some of these positions as training for some of the folks come out of gangs?
Well, we're going to be designing a training program, and there'll be recruitment outreach to try to bring people into the LADWP family. But
have they met with you or any of your representatives? Because they had a whole package of information.
They haven't met with me. They may have met with people at LADWP. I don't know.
Mr. D'Arcy, Brian, if you can come forward, please. Thank you. Yesterday, I met with a gentleman from Hometown Industries.
You mean Homeboy or Home?
Homeboy Industries.
Marvin said that Hometown was a buffet.
That's right. Homeboy. I'm from the Valley. It's a little different out there.
Homeboy.
Excuse me for my my error in that. The gentleman had a packet of information, and I think it was going around to council offices to bring some of the folks that they're bringing in to get involved in this project. Have you dealt with them? Are you involved in this at all?
This is Father Boyle's group.
Right.
And we talked actually through the city attorney's office, and we expressed some interest in part of the whole, some of this isn't totally evolved yet, but, the general language of the ordinance would allow us to do kind of a screening. There's various workforce development groups out there that do minimal screening, and so we can get these candidates, and they're using, these are at risk and or offenders, and it's a way to deal with all of that. And that's the whole purpose, is to be able to screen people and give them life and job skills and put them in a program where they can compete for these jobs in the future. I mean,
so you have that component as part of this plan.
It is certainly something that we can do.
Then they can become IBEW people and join the workforce.
I mean, we're looking at a 40% retirement rate over the next 5 years. I mean, we're already 1,000 back. I mean, we can't. At some point, you're not going to be able to keep up. I mean,
well, to me, it was a wonderful program to bring those folks in, and they're trying to work with Father Boyle and his crew. And then when the man mentioned this and showed me the packet of information, I said, I knew it was coming into council.
We would love to work with
tie-in.
Father Boyle on that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. You may be seated.
Thank you.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, Madam President, for your strong leadership in the chair there. Colleagues, when this comes back to us, if we decide to move this forward, we have until November the 7th. So essentially what we have is, and I'd encourage us to schedule this maybe for November 4th. I know it's Election Day, but that's going to be easier than the day after Election Day. And I think to push this for Friday is probably going to be too quick. I think we're going to need this weekend to work and to hear everything that's been said. For myself to vote on that final, do we put this on the ballot? I have three kind of criteria. One is on the openness issue of having some sense from the department that there is the openness, not just the openness, but the direction, as you have said here, but putting more down in paper, of moving forward in a variety of ways of getting to our goals overall in solar. That this is probably the biggest and to me the most significant chunk, but it is not the only one to assuage the entire industry, which is a very important jobs engine here in Los Angeles. Secondly, it's on the cost piece. As the report that came back from DWP put it, it's about 3 to 4 times the residential rate over a 25-year amortized rate. Is that correct?
Right.
But that's comparing us, obviously, not to renewables. That's comparing us to the cheapest fuel, the cheapest energy we get right now out of coal primarily.
Yes, that's correct.
So we want to make sure that cost comparison is also done with apples and apples, or at least fruit from the same group. As Mr. Weezer was saying, wind versus solar, the cost of transmission lines, all those things. So we need to get to the CLA and DWP really need to work closely together on that, because if we're going to, with eyes wide open, go to the ballot, because make no mistake, colleagues, we can do this by ordinance, and I'll get to that in a second, but if we go to the ballot, the reason we go to the ballot, which I'll get to in a second, we need to be able to make these arguments, because that is a risk. It's a risk that may be worth taking because of two reasons for me. One, you engage Angelenos in this comprehensively. This becomes a project of the city, not just of the city council. And secondly, it puts a little bit more stricter than we would in a normal ordinance the inability of somebody else to come and say, well, we're not really into solar right now, we're just going to go back to coal, we're going to go back to cheaper ways. We know that we have to do, the long-term cost of living cheap in the short term has been our health, has been global warming, has been many things, and this would solidify it from a vote of the people. But the third piece for me as well is, looking at achievability. And that's really been the piece that nobody has for sure been able to say we know 100% that it's achievable. But we also know that nothing gets done around here without deadlines. We know that nothing gets done around here without goals. And we also know that the perfect here is always the enemy of the good, because there's rarely a perfect public policy initiative at any level of government. What we need to have the assurance by the time this comes to us on November 7th, though, is that this wasn't a promise that was driven by pie-in-the-sky ideals, but by hard, cold numbers that were achievable. Because the way this happens is, first, we go to the department if we're not meeting those goals and say, why have you failed? Then the people come to us and the mayor and say, why did you fail? It was under your watch. And then that's where the accountability ultimately rests with the people. Why did you come to us, the voters, to ask to do this if it wasn't achievable? And the achievability piece, I think, is the most important piece. I'm very reassured with the ramping up and ramping down and extending out the time period. I think that's smart of us to be doing. I also think that it's good for us to look at the flexibility and the ability, with a high threshold, but of the vote of the council to be able to look at how do we actually get there? What sort of flexibility do we need even beyond that? But we don't want that to be an excuse for the department not driving hard, for the mayor's office to be able to push that hard as well. And then lastly, the logistics, which I brought up a number of times, and we have some back-of-the-napkin calculations, but the amount of square footage we need and the incentives for the property owners, I think, is where the rubber will hit the road, or where the silicon will hit the roof, as it is. We have to be able to make sure that we have property owners who are not going to say, sounds like a good plan, but I don't want the trouble with the city doing any of that. We have to lock something in place that is an advantage for these property owners, whether it's some sort of electricity break, whether it's that they get some sort of tie back in for the power, something that makes it, because the calculations we've seen, colleagues, and I think this is correct, is anywhere from about a quarter to a half of all roofs in Los Angeles have to say yes to this. Is that correct for us to get the square footage we need? That was initially a DWP calculation, but is it?
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
I mean, yeah, I was about to say no, but I cited the source. But if it's less, great. I mean, if it only is 1 out of 10 roofs, that begins to be much more achievable. If it gets to 1 out of 3 roofs, you're going to be hesitant. If it's half the roofs in Los Angeles, I mean, to get half the businesses to do anything in Los Angeles is very difficult, let alone a physical project. So that, and I know a lot of the roofs won't necessarily sustain the structures, and so that is the achievability piece that I think between now and then we need to really get to. And we should be confident, and we should be brave, and we should be willing to go forward, and we should be confident and brave and willing enough at that point, if we're still not quite there, to say there is a number of ways of doing that. We can get there by ordinance in a month from now. We can go back to the voters at the very next election. But I want us to strive as hard as we can to make sure we've done our work now, so that we have that option for March, because I think if we can get those ducks in order, this will be something we look back on very proudly, and that we will have done it in the responsible way, and we will have led the way for this entire country to a solar future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcetti. Mr. Alarcon.
Yes, I would add to Mr. Garcetti's comments that I would like to have a better understanding of the investment credits that the federal government provides in this program, and how we can maximize that opportunity to expand the economic development opportunity and creating more jobs for people throughout Los Angeles. But I wouldn't have said that. I could have told you that in private, but I'm standing up because of Mr. Rosenthal's comments, and I just want to make it clear that the Department of Water and Power's analysis is going to be based on a pragmatic approach, a practical approach that looks at where are the best opportunities in Los Angeles. I would remind my colleagues that the Department of Water and Power recently in an analysis, I can't point to it, but in an analysis of the solar energy program, it was determined that primarily the wealthy were the only ones to take advantage of the solar project, and we absolutely have to saturate down to everybody in our city if we're going to have an effective solar program. So I want to make it clear that we're not going to be targeting neighborhoods because a council member says, I need you to come to my neighborhood. We're going to do it based on the best pragmatic analysis we can make as to where the best opportunities are. And although I have to admit, Mr. Rosendahl, I'm very pleased that the report says the Northeast Valley might be the greatest opportunity to initiate this program, but that we will spread this throughout the city of Los Angeles because 400 megawatts essentially is more than 50% of the capacity of the need. So you can't do that in any one particular community. It's going to be throughout Los Angeles, and if the voters are going to support this down the road, they need to know that they're going to get a piece of it. And so we're not going to be driven by political whim, but by pragmatic analysis and what's the best in the best interest of promoting this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Perry.
Thanks, Mr. President. I just wanted to say a few words. You know, democracy is a challenging process. Democracy is a very messy process at times. This is a process that protects us not only from each other, but protects the right, the opportunity for the ratepayers and the voters to be given full consideration. This process is going to put the information that we're talking about directly on the ballot for the consumption of the voters, and then it will be up to the voters to either affirm it or deny it. I think going to the ballot is a very direct way to build either consensus or not. But we'll be giving the voters the chance to participate, and they give their reaction to this through their vote. Of course, the most illuminating part about putting this on the ballot will be the ballot arguments, both for and against. Again, an even deeper and more significant opportunity for voters to educate themselves. Now, I understand the importance of this, and that's why I signed on to it, because it's fighting for the next generation of green jobs and expanding the horizon of opportunity for the workers at IBEW, and there's nothing wrong with that. We are at government. This is a public entity. We are, just like the private sector, to be to provide stimulus and to provide opportunity for the people that we employ, and hopefully leveraging that it would have a multiplier effect not only in the public sector but in the private sector too. But it is a delicate balance, and then the balance that we will have to seek to achieve is that delicate balance of expanding the job opportunities, embracing and being ready and having a workforce that is ready for this type of job, and achieving an optimal rate for the ratepayer. And it's like a seesaw, and where the fulcrum is, and you find that perfect point where you achieve ultimate balance. And we're going to have to rely very heavily on the department to push and teach and educate not only us but the public on how we achieve that balance. But again, I think in some ways going to the ballot is probably one of the smartest things to do, because people will either vote it up or they'll vote it down. Hopefully they'll vote it up.
Thank you. Mr. Smith is our next speaker, then Ms. Gruhl, and then Mr. LaBonge.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just two things. One, have you done a cost analysis on this yet? What is this program going to cost to do?
Well, as I said earlier, the ordinance right now is still evolving. There are parts of it that are changing. There are additional flexibility that's being added. One example is just the extension to 2014, which has just been arrived at. So we're modeling a whole bunch of different scenarios. I'm reticent to talk about them until we have an ordinance that is before you, and then we'll talk about it at that point.
I'll wait on that point, but let me ask this one question. It was said to me that the cost factor of this is mostly in the employee cost. No, I'm saying the other way around. Mostly in material cost, not employee cost.
It's material costs and installation costs.
Okay, and that's the most of the cost factor.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we're talking about the employees, there's some cost savings, but the real issue is driving costs down, and that's going to come in the marketplace, not in employment. That would be correct?
I'm not sure if I follow you, Councilman.
That the cost factors of this project are going to be in the purchasing of the panels and materials, not so much in the employment of people.
I think it's both. It's purchasing the materials and installing them on roofs or parking lots or
Well, then when we get back to the cost issue, I want to see some analysis of that.
Yes.
Talk about it. Folks, I have before you, I mentioned an amendment I wanted to make. It is now before you as 37A, and I want to comment on something Mr. Darcy said. And Mr. Darcy is absolutely right that IBEW number 18 has the MOU rights to make decisions. What I'm saying in 37A is that we don't hire DWP employees first, but as a second choice. Mr. Darcy still has the right to determine whether we have enough people within 18 at DWP to put on the project, and if he doesn't, then he has to go to the hiring hall or make those choices about outside contracting. That's the MOU. I want that clarified when you come back with your final draft on that, and if 37A passes, what we're saying is let's make it our priority to find the right employment mix. I believe that there are a lot of people out there. In fact, I believe Local 11 actually has the most qualified people in this city to do this work, not Local 18. And so we shouldn't be getting ourselves in the middle of unions. We should say we're going to be a union project, it's going to be done with union labor. Let's not bicker over that, but what's going to be the right thing to do? Local 11 has trained people. They've been doing this for a long time. The Carpenters Union have people that install the stuff. They don't hook up the electricity, but they install. We shouldn't be tied to picking one source only. And I think that's what 37A does. And Mr. Darcy, thank you for the thumbs down. It proves the point. What we need to do is be flexibility, and that's exactly what 37A does. It gives the flexibility to hire union employees in any one of the unions that can do the work under the guise that the city always has, and that is union labor, union wages, union benefits, and whatever one works best. I do not want to hire lots of people at DWP right now to do this work because, as Mr. Darcy pointed out, at some point we can't hire enough people anymore. I think we're going to reach that point with the infrastructure plan that is already approved, the 1,000 employees we're trying to hire now. We don't need this extra burden. Let's open it up to any of the unions that can provide the work within the guidelines that we as a city want. And that's good labor, good union jobs, whatever union can do the job best, let's choose them and not be locked into a system that ties our hands. And so that's what 37A does. Thank you.
Mr. LaBonge.
Thank you. Mr. Nahai, I have one question for the viewing public out there. You have these goals here that you want to achieve. I just wanted to see it right here on page 1 of your report. 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 100 megawatts up to, all that. Give the public out there, and myself too, because I'm more of a water guy than a power guy, even though I love both sides of water and power. How much is 50 megawatts? What are we talking about? Is everything between Sunset Boulevard and Pico and La Brea and Vermont, or what would that be?
Well, let me put it this way. The entire program, 400 megawatts, will be enough for over 100,000 households.
100,000 households. Right. So, whatever 100,000
50
households.
megawatts would just,
Right, but let's just say, if you say 100,000, like if even in single-family houses or if it's apartments, it would be in an area. Give it an idea.
Households, so think maybe 4 people in a household,
Right.
400,000 people.
400,000
So that's
people.
what.
See, it's a significant part of our percentage.
Oh yes.
Right.
Yeah. In terms of the people who would be served, it is. It's significant.
And I just want to ask, would the mayor's deputy mayor, all good and green, want to say anything?
just I think this discussion has been very helpful, and look forward to working with the council on this.
Nancy Sutley does a great job and has been revered in conversation with people around the world. So I just want to thank you for your effort. Thank you, Nancy.
Ms. Gruhl.
Thank you very much. And this has been a good discussion and a commitment, I think, by this. And I know, and I want to ask a process question of you, Mr. Miller. So tell us what we do today, what happens between now and the next, when do we have to vote, what's the next time, et cetera?
Well, today, assuming you vote to instruct city attorney in my office and the department to draft language, we would go forth and draft that language and then bring it back here to be considered. I believe Mr. Garcetti now says we're looking at trying to do it on the 4th. The deadline to actually...
Should be in council on the 4th? Is that what you're saying, Mr. Garcetti?
Yeah, to have it in council, and then we don't have to, we can act as late as the 7th, correct?
Right. The 7th is the deadline.
Great. Thank you. 7th is the late. So then,
Yes.
and if there are issues or things that come up between now and November 4th, and and even potentially November 7th, there is time to have those. It's not like a hard and fast necessarily today. When we instruct the city attorney, there's been times where the city attorney said you can't make any changes. It's been noticed for this.
No. What we will be doing is digesting, the committee report, any changes that you make here, and working with the mayor's office and the department, city attorney, and bring back for you the language that we believe meets the intent. If we have questions, we'll seek clarification. But that will give you some opportunity then, if you hear it on the 4th, to have some more time to actually see the exact language and make sure that it did meet the intent of the council with your instructions.
Okay. And so at 37A, I think some of the concerns I have, I understand Mr. Smith's issues as far as wanting to make sure we have some flexibility there, but it sounded like, and this is something you have to come back with as to its legality of, our bargaining and all the other kinds of things that exist right now. And so I'm not comfortable with this at this moment, is I guess what I'm saying, as to some of the things you need to come back and be able to share with us as we go forward.
Correct. The language in the committee report that was in our report that went to committee was intended really to reflect the current situation of work being done in-house, obviously, is by employees, and then contracting out provisions would be according to the MOUs. We would clearly, in the next few days, have to work with city attorney to see if there are any meet and confer issues or other issues with this language.
So what I was asking him, Mr. Smith, was on 37A, without having some discussion of its legality and what our union, agreements are, so forth. They wouldn't feel comfortable at this point supporting that, but would want to make sure that they come back and share with us. And the other point I want to be able to make is that you've said this does not limit contracting out.
It does not.
Okay. I want to say that again. This does not limit contracting out. It is, the public-private partnership here and looking at what's going to be most feasible and within the current laws that exist for the city as to the work performed.
Well, again, to be clear, our intent in coming to the committee, and my understanding of the intent is what's before you on the original language, is that your actions would not change the process for contracting out.
Right. That currently exists.
That currently exist.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Garcetti.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing up those points as well, Ms. Gruhl. One piece that I think we need to instruct to, I wanted to be clear, is not just the overall cost in terms of what the production is, but what you believe the cost to be to the ratepayer. And if we don't do this, that's what you're comparing it with, because we still have our renewable mandates. So that's really the comparison I think that we owe the public, we owe ourselves. And it may be the same because, we may be doing it with wind, we may be purchasing it elsewhere. But that's the piece, too, that when this comes back for our final vote, we're going to need CLA and DWP to really get together. I know you've done some calculations overall on what it would be compared to the regular rate, but that's irrelevant because for all of us, we're pushing for green power, whether it's going to be solar or not. We really want to see if you can do that hard work this weekend of boiling down what would the impact be to the ratepayer of any of this. Will we save money long term because we don't have the transmission lines, because we're going to do solar in a different way? Is it going to be slightly more expensive, but this is how much it's going to be? Would the ECAF be extended a little bit longer than it would have been? As much as you can tell us that, we need to just have that eyes wide open. We may decide to do that even with slightly more cost, because we know, again, the long-term cost of living cheaply in the short term. But we really need those numbers. I think we owe that to the people. We owe that to this body. We owe it to the mayor as well. And just to be clear also with the mayor's office, and I appreciate that you're looking forward to working with us as we move forward with this. I just wanted to make sure as we look at the coalition that we're on the record too. The mayor is in favor of us moving forward with this today?
Yes, the mayor strongly supports moving forward with this today.
Okay, just want to make sure
Thank you, Mr.
on that
President.
as well. Thank you. Okay, so with that, I think, colleagues, what I would do is we have that one amendment that the DWP put forward in terms of the schedule here, which on their plan, I guess it's a year later than what's put there on the plan. I would move that change in terms of the drafting of this. And did we resolve on the legal issues to move forward with drafted with both, or to look at that? I mean, we have to move something forward, some instruction.
The only other issue was on the charter amendment language, and I don't know, Jerry, if in my conversations I missed you saying that part of it, that should be part of the drafting of this language.
Yes, I think there need to be two things. A brief charter amendment giving the authority to the council to direct that this occur, and then the referendum ordinance itself would be the documents that would be before you.
And I think, Mr. Garcetti, what I said on Mr. Smith's was I wasn't comfortable in voting on that today because we weren't sure of the language, if it was inconsistent with our negotiated agreements and so forth, but that the city attorney should come back and report on it between now and then.
Well, the best way to resolve, because I think we trigger another time clock, is to be looking at that simultaneously and perhaps drafting two versions of that, because if my memory serves me correct, if we do it in the past where we can either vote on it now and people can vote that up or now, but if we don't, and city attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, if we make substantive changes after the drafting comes back, what does that do in terms of the trigger of making us hit the Friday deadline?
So long as we're...
Motion to move
my only motion was on the DWP timeline.
I wasn't clear whether you were making a motion to have 37A as part of the analysis.
No, that's what I'm trying to find out right now, whether we need to do. I haven't made a motion yet.
So long as the changes that you might wish to make when we bring the language back, so long as there's sufficient time and the ability to bring the revisions back to you by the 7th and for you to vote on them by the 7th, there's no problem.
Okay. So on the
7th is the absolute deadline.
4th, we get that analysis back on the 4th, and then we decide to, you bring us a draft on the 4th, we make that analysis, we can either insert or choose not to between then and the 7th?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think that'd be fine with it.
And I think the only, if I can, Mr. Garcetti, in your time, just say,
Sure,
I think if you do both of them, it does not.
Yeah, no, I'm withdrawing that, because if we can get that by the 4th, we don't need to do that.
We don't need to do that. Okay.
We can insert it, I think is what the city attorney just told us.
Mr. Smith.
That would be a friendly amendment to take 37A and say it's a dual instruction, and then we'll decide when they come
Which
back.
one do we want to go? Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Mr. Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question about 37A, a clarification? I believe it purports to set a priority for the various labor sources for the work, and I just want to clarify, it is that hiring hall forces would be utilized first before...
I think he's clarifying your statement. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, 37A sets forth a priority, and the first priority would be that the work would be done by hiring hall forces, not DWP employees?
Correct. Not necessarily, the last opportunity is DWP employees. That allows the MOU to take effect. Mr. Darcy can say, we've got people who can do it. If we don't have people who can do it, then it goes to those other sources. That's the MOU agreement. I think we can clarify that in that when it comes back.
Okay. Thank you.
I understand that, Mr. President.
Hold on. Wait a second. Mr. Garcetti still has it, and then Ms.
One
Grewal.
last instruction on my time. Can you also let us know if the charter change? Can you talk maybe to the CAO to see if that affects at all our bond rating? Because I do know that our bond rating sometimes is also rests on the governance structure that's there, and I just want to make sure that we keep that as strong as possible as well.
Mr. Wesson, followed by Ms. Grewal.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I commend the President of the Council for trying to be Solomesque in his suggestion as to what we do with 37A. For me personally, I'd like for us to deal with 37A today. You know, either we're going to move forward with it or we take it off the table right now. I mean, so if I know I'm kind of uncomfortable in trying to sequence the order of how one would move forward and, dole this work out. I think that they have, if I understood what you said, that there's already the flexibility to contract out and to do the other things that is needed. And with that said, I just don't understand why, other than to add another 40 minutes to the next discussion. And and if that's what you want to do, I'm okay with that. But if the majority of the people here are not supportive of 37A, then I would be comfortable in us just dealing with it right now and giving a single instruction to the city attorney when they bring this back to us.
Ms. Gruhl?
No, that was my...
Mr. Alarcon. Followed by Mr. LaBonge.
Well, if we do vote on 37A, then I have to say that I'm opposed. Without the benefit of analysis, based on my 5 years as chairman of the Senate Labor and Industrial Relations Committee for the state of California, that this is absolutely a meet and confer item, and IBEW is the official entity to have the opportunity to meet and confer, and I think this would undermine that provision, and so I would have to oppose it on its face. If we vote on it, I don't have a problem with them coming back with an analysis, because I think that's what the analysis is going to say. But if we're going to vote on it right now, then I'm strongly opposed.
Mr. LaBonge?
Mr. Smith, I don't know if you were in the room when Mr. Darcy, who's the representative, could I just ask some clarification, whether from DWP or Joe, or you could clarify, or who? Because there was some explanation about the challenges of what was the intent of your motion. Mr. Darcy, if you want to just, on my time.
Richard's right. I don't know how you could adjudicate our recognition and our jurisdiction, because this motion also is extremely unclear, because when it talks about hiring hall, we have a hiring hall. We hire daily rate exempt employees who are considered by the city attorney's office as employees of DWP. So if you say hiring hall, you're excluding them, because you say you can't hire DWP employees. I think that we have the flexibility, the way it exists, to do all of this. It's our jurisdiction. We can dispatch it, but the language that you're proffering here is just going to ball everything up, because this isn't about the carpenter's jurisdiction. It's not their jurisdiction, quite simply. And you're muddying it up by this motion. So I would vote it down.
But also on that particular issue too, Mr. Smith, that because it's set up that way, to have this, our concept may be a meritorious concept, but it doesn't work based on the city attorney and what, as Mr. Alarcon spoke of earlier, on what are requirements. So I would only ask that there be a report back then from the, not tie it up, as Mr. Weston said, let's go forward with this plan, but there be a report back on looking for ways to be creative to make sure we hire everybody that we can in the proper ways, in the legal ways, in this situation. Similar to what Record Parks has done when they hire from the hall on issues. Because I think what Mr. Darcy said is correct, based on no city attorney who's been here for 3.5 hours jumped up and said they're not correct. So this is what I would suggest that we do, that we just ask for a report back from the CLA on that, move forward what Mr. Weston said, which was Mr. Garcetti's initiative.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you. The point, Mr. Darcy, is the motion very clearly says hire DWP new employees last. Mr. Alarcon, if you're chairman of the Senate committee, you should know we have an MOU now. We already have an MOU, and it gives Mr. Darcy the authority to make those kind of decisions. So I am asking for the CLA to draft something and let the city attorney to tell us whether it's legal or not. If you want to kill this today, kill it today. If you want options, then let them come forward and bring back a plan and see if it works. And it can answer your question, Mr. Alarcon. It can answer Mr. LaBonge's question. It can answer everyone's question. But the questions don't get answered if we don't pass 37A or send it back and say bring it back when it comes back to council. I'm just saying here's an option. If If you guys want to shoot it down because you believe Mr. Darcy should have all the employees and run DWP, then vote for it. That's fine. If you believe that we looked at the best options out there, what's the most economical options out there, what makes sense for water and power out there, then pass 37A, and I'm willing to let it go forward, and Ms. Gruhl said, with the dual recommendation. Bring us both back, and then that's what we do as a council. We make that decision, Mr. Wesson. We're not making it today. We're saying bring back the options and let us look at it, and if it doesn't work, then you vote against it. If you want to stop it and don't have those options, today's your opportunity to kill 37A. If you don't want options, vote no. If you want options, vote yes.
Okay, colleagues, I believe that Mr. Smith has asked that to be studied. It is no longer put forward as a item to vote on. Is that correct? So with that, it is not before us. Somebody would have to make it again to have that before us today. And if nobody makes that, we have as amended. And the only thing that was amended was the instruction on the timeline and some additional instructions on research back, and the street lights and the neighborhood council's involvement as well. Okay?
We're going to vote on 37A.
We're not.
We're not.
No. Mr. Smith has asked for it to be studied and analyzed. And
But he also said if we want to kill it today, we should kill it, or if we want options, to bring it back.
But procedurally, since that's been withdrawn by him as a motion to vote on, somebody would have to put that forward to kill it, besides Mr. Smith.
I didn't withdraw the motion. I said let's combine it and send it back and bring back both options. That is the existing with
Correct.
this 37A option.
Correct.
So I'm not withdrawing the motion.
Well, do you want to redraft that? So you're asking this not to be a motion to vote on, but you're asking the words that are on 37A to be analyzed and be brought back with the option of incorporating
we
it or
can
not.
do that. That's fine.
That's different, because this, if we take it as is, the motion says to adopt it.
Right.
So, to make that clear, Mr. Smith has asked for the words in 37A to be analyzed with two options back. Is there an objection to that? Okay. If there's not an objection, that's accepted as a friendly part of the instruction of court. To reiterate, we're not adopting the language of it. Okay?
The friendly part about Ms. Hahn said about street lighting and park lighting.
Yes, that's accepted without objection.
What I said about neighborhood council.
Absolutely. Every other motion that's been made has been accepted without objection as friendly. Okay. So please open the roll on the instruction, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
14 ayes.
Okay. Thank you, colleagues. We will schedule that as we will put a placeholder for Tuesday, the 4th, to look at that next. And in the meantime, we will be in our conversations with the department and the CLA as they draft this. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Item 39, call special by Councilmember Smith.
Mr. Smith, item 39, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this kind of goes along with the discussion we just had at Water and Power. What I'm asking for is a motion that we brought in last week, actually while I was absent, to get it on the ballot and to give instructions to put on the ballot a ordinance which would allow the voters to determine that the City Council, in conjunction with the mayor, would have the ability to negotiate special agreements to bring jobs and businesses to Los Angeles. We are in a very competitive market nationally. Cities all over the country are taking business from us because we can't offer similar deals. We have no jurisdiction to offer cut rates for water and power. What if we had a facility that was going to build power panels for DWP? They want to locate here, but they say, you know what, we can't afford to do that unless you can make us a deal. And so other cities make those deals. Los Angeles has no ability to make those deals. This asks for an instruction for the CLA and the city attorney to bring back an opportunity to go to the ballot to say to the voters, we would like the jurisdiction under certain defined circumstances to offer a deal to businesses that create, say, 100 or 200 jobs, that do services for the city of LA that we want here locally, that would cut our cost in purchasing such as solar panels, things like that. This is just an authorization for the voters to allow us to compete in the global market that we're in and compete particularly with other cities around the United States that are making those property deals, that are making those financing deals that we just don't compete with. So this is merely an instruction to go to the ballot to allow the voters to give us that jurisdiction. Ask your support.
Okay. Colleagues, anybody, another ballot proposition? Anybody wishing to be heard? All right. Please open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
13 ayes.
Unity. That is approved. Next item, please.
Mr. President, there is a special one, and the city attorney will speak to the findings.
Mr. City Attorney on the findings.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since the posting of today's agenda, the city learned of the Federal Maritime Commission agendizing in closed session on October 29th whether to challenge the Clean Trucks Program agreement under the Shipping Act. Immediate action is required for council to state its position to the commission before tomorrow's commission meeting. Council must first make findings pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2 before considering the substantive motion.
Thank you. Anybody on the findings? Not on the findings? We'll open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote on the findings.
13 ayes.
And now on the substance, Ms. Hahn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, earlier this year we voted to support and approve the Clean Trucks program at the Port of Los Angeles, which bans the dirtiest diesel trucks from entering our port. And as of October 1st, we began banning all 1989, pre-89 trucks coming in the Port of Los Angeles. This has been one of the strongest things we've done to begin to reduce the diesel emission coming from the operations at the ports. We also, on this City Council, approved a clean truck fee, which helps pay for the replacement of 16,000 of these dirty trucks. And this is very important because we're helping to replace these dirty trucks, and we're giving a subsidy to allow companies to buy new, cleaner trucks. And we know that the port accounts for about 20% of all the air pollution in Los Angeles, not just in and around the harbor area. Soon after our vote, the Trucking Association sued the city, sued the port, to stop them from implementing this clean truck program. We fought alongside the NRDC to ensure that this program would go forward, and we won. Well, now, some in the industry have gone to the Federal Maritime Commission, which has the ability to review agreements under the Shipping Act to ensure that rates and tariffs that the ports approve are not violating some antitrust laws. I have learned, since we posted our last agenda, that the Federal Maritime Commissioners are considering tomorrow, in a closed session meeting, whether or not to sue the port in the federal district court to stop the implementation of this bold, courageous, clean program that will actually save lives of people that breathe that air. Colleagues, this would be the first time in history that this commission would exercise its authority under the Shipping Act to stop us from cleaning up our air and reducing this incredible public health risk which has been allowed to go on for too long. This is important to the City of Los Angeles. This is important to our residents. So please join me by voting yes on this resolution. And let's send a strong message to the Federal Maritime Commission, which is clearly, in my opinion, overstepping its bounds well beyond what Congress intended by suing us in federal court to challenge this great program. Let's oppose this action and tell them that this is the wrong thing to do. I would appreciate your aye vote on this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hahn. Anybody else? If not, let's go ahead and open the roll, close the roll, and tabulate the vote.
12 ayes.
That is approved. Next order of business.
Council has motions for posting and referral.
Those are posted and referred.
There are excuses on the desk. Councilmember Gruhl requests to be excused to arrive at 10:30 on Wednesday, December 17th for personal business that meets council policy.
She is excused.
Councilmember Parks requests to be excused Friday, October 31st for personal business. A motion is required.
Okay, I'll move that. He's excused.
And Councilmember Perry requests to be excused to leave at 11:15 on Tuesday, November 18th for city business that meets council policy.
All right, she's excused as well.
That clears the desk.
Any business announcements, colleagues? Committee meetings, anything else? If not, can I ask everybody to please rise for adjourning motions, please? Colleagues, Ms. Perry and I wanted to start by adjourning in memory of the father of one of our colleagues, Bernard Parks' father, Earl Winfred Parks, passed away and this Monday, and Mr. Parks was very close with a father who inspired him and made him the man who he was. We all know Councilmember Parks' own public service career, but his father's spanned half a century as well. He was 87 and he died in a local hospital on Monday morning after years of declining health. The older Parks served with Los Angeles Port Police for 38 years and was proud to see his son rise through the ranks of the Los Angeles Police Department to become its chief. Ms. Perry.
Mr. President, I think a lot of people didn't realize as the elder Parks, Mr. Parks, the father, was declining in health, his son quietly and diligently took care of him every week and attended to his personal well-being without discussion, without complaint, and without fanfare. And so he was a devoted son to his father. He did say that his father never suggested that he follow his footsteps into law enforcement, but that his father was proud of him that he did that. His father was born March 15th, 1921 in Oklahoma, and he did grow up in Watts, worked for the Port Police, and Mr. Katayan, Mr. Avak, says his father actually worked for a time in the Chief Legislative Analyst's office. Maybe Mr. Garcetti may have some more facts on that. He worked for Attorney General Evel Younger and held posts in other city departments. And so I suppose his father was his inspiration to go into public service, and his father had a half a century, and his son is almost up to 40 years and beyond that, I think. His survivors are his former wife, Mr. Parks' mother, Gertrude M. Parks, son Arthur Parks, and daughters Agnes, Tally, and Cleo Ingram, and I believe that arrangements for services are now pending.
I know a lot of members would like to add their good wishes as well. Mr. Smith, I know Ms. Hahn. Anybody else? Mr. Rosendahl.
If I could say a few words about Earl Parks. I knew Earl very well. Earl and I and a few other members, former members of the council, etc., used to go fishing every year up at Lake Crowley. A great fisherman. He loved to fish. His son Bernard was afraid of boats, so Bernard never joined us fishing there. But I had many opportunities to sit around a campfire and to talk to Earl. Earl really had a great sense of humor. He was a funny guy, very engaging, very friendly guy, very outgoing. And people that worked with him in the CLA's office loved Earl. Earl worked here for a number of years under Kenny Spiker Sr., who was our CLA for many years, and did many work around here. But also, a funny story to show you his sense of humor. Earl was a spitting image of Tom Bradley. You put Tom and Earl in the room together, you weren't sure which was the real Tom Bradley. And they're both tall and very, very distinguished gentlemen. One time working for the CLA, Earl went to deliver some packages to the mayor's office, some information to the mayor's office, and there was a group of senior citizens who had been protesting something or other in the city, waiting out in the mayor's reception area, and they'd been there for like 3 hours and had not gotten in to see Tom Bradley yet. When Earl walked in the room, they all said, "Mr. Mayor, we've been waiting here 3 hours and we want to talk to you." And Earl said, "I'll be with you just one moment. Let me check in my office. I'll be right back." He left his documents off and walked out the back door and never came back. And Tom Bradley was there with a serious bunch of really mad people. But that was the kind of sense of humor he had. He was a charming man, and I feel very badly for the Parks family right now, but I feel very fortunate to have known Earl Parks. He was a fine gentleman.
Thank you, Ms. Hahn and Ms. Rosendahl. Mr.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to certainly, first of all, give my personal sympathy and condolences to Bernard and Bobby. I left a message on his cell phone yesterday, but I'm sure everybody did, and just saying it's, no matter when it comes in life, it's very tough to lose a dad. You're just never quite prepared for that. But Earl Parks, just as you said, and as everybody said, he was just the greatest guy. I really got to know him. Well, first of all, as he's a legend in the Port Police down in the harbor, but he was also a merchant marine. And there was a group in Wilmington called the China Coasters that were a chapter of the Merchant Marines, and they would have regular chili cook-offs, and he would sit around with these guys, sounds much like he would do with you, Greg, and just tell stories and friendly, and they would always invite me, and I would go. And even when Bernard was the chief of police, He would actually come down there in his car with his escorts and to be there and sit with his dad during those chili cook-off times. So he was very much loved in Wilmington. Very much loved. Everyone knew Earl Parks there. He was quite a part of that community, and he was always so friendly to me, and we talked a lot just about public service. He loved my dad. He was a good friend of my dad's, and we're going to really miss Earl Parks. And I know he's been very proud of Bernard. I'm sure he's been very proud of his son, but it's always tough to lose a dad. But he was just a great guy, and really leaves a real legacy in the harbor area.
Mr. Rosendahl, Mr. LaBonge, Ms. Gruhl also on this?
Yeah, mine is for Bernard Parks, as a devoted son that he has been, and watching his father through the last few years, and his love and his devotion to his dad. And of course, Bernard is in a campaign right now, so it's a tough time to lose your dad. So my prayers go to Bernard Parks through this process that he's now involved in.
Thank you, Mr. LaBonge.
Bernard Parks is the richest man in town because of his family that he has and the strength that he has. It's a little not as strong today, but they'll gather around and know that he lived a beautiful life. And Earl was so well respected, and I would love to see him and John Farrar chat up there when Earl was here in younger days. So God bless Earl Parks in his memory, and to live a beautiful life and to have a son and a family such as that he has with Art and his daughters as well.
Ms. Gruhl.
And I did not have the pleasure of knowing him as well as you all did, but I think you're right, Ms. Hahn and Mr. LaBonge, everyone, that he should be very proud of his son. And losing a parent is very difficult no matter what age they are, because we are a part of them. And I know that Bernard and his family and his strength does come from that length of his, not only the number of family members, and what was his mother who came in here, who was over 100, I think, the last time that they have longevity in that Parks family. But I just want him to know that we are all thinking about him and his entire family, and send our condolences.
Thank you. Other adjourning motions, Mr. Aliquin? Sorry, Mr. Reyes on this.
Thank you, Council President. Colleagues, I'd like to adjourn today in honor of a good friend, Grayson Douglas Cook. He was a well-loved community leader, family man, and friend from the Mount Washington community. He died October 14th at the age of 70. Grayson served his country as a U.S. Navy officer in Japan. After his military service, he went on to serve the community with great love and dedication. A member and past president of the Mount Washington Association, Grayson was a career probation officer with the county and ran a camp for delinquent girls. Many of the students he helped participate in motivational reading programs or work with animals through the Humane Society. As a result, the reading levels shot up dramatically. An unofficial champion and counselor for at-risk teens and adults, Grayson also worked with the Big Brothers organization. Known for his compelling voice and presence, Grayson was an extraordinary storyteller at Adama Elementary School, libraries, and various literary programs. Grayson was also Santa Claus at community events and volunteered for Heritage Square, Southern Museum, and other organizations. Grayson was gregarious, a friend to so many who felt like when they were alone in the world. He was so full of life until the very end. At age 70, he was taking voice lessons and sang wonderfully for his 70th birthday party. You know, Grayson lived a block away from me. Where I live, we're like on a hill. And I have a tendency to clean my own yard, to rake and sweep with my sons. And he always stopped by and he would ask me, so what camping consultant told you to do that? He would always talk about our work in our yard with my kids, and he would say, "Hey, that's good for the soul." And he's just the kind of person that was so grounded down, and I'm going to miss him. When I first ran for office, he was one of the few in the neighborhood that actually said, "Do it, I'll support you, you know, no matter what anyone else says, follow your dream." And he was there. We're going to miss him.
Thank you. Mr. Wieser.
Second, that I also send my condolences to his family. I got to know him as Mr. Reyes did. He's a very active person in Mount Washington, and Mr. Reyes and myself and Mr. Garcetti share that area. This guy was just a very thoughtful person that in the heat of the debate on a particular issue was always a person who stood up, and often stood up and just brought some rationality to these debates, and someone who often chuckled at the end and had just a very joyful laugh that brought everyone together. And I'm certainly going to miss him, as I know all of the Mount Washington community, Northeast community will miss him.
Thank you. We'll add you to that as well. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have another one, Mr. Reza?
I also had another with Mr. Garcetti, and colleagues, I asked that if you could join me in a journey in the memory of Michael Garcia, a senior at Salesian High School, who left this earth far too soon. He was only 17 years old. An alum from Salesian, and we certainly miss Michael. He was only with us for a short while, but he left a remarkable impression on many. The young athlete who had developed a close bond with his wrestling team passed away on October 15th in his sleep. Michael, or MG as he was known, was often referred to as someone who loved his music, his wrestling, his family, his classmates, and Salesian High School. Michael will be greatly missed by all who knew and loved him. He leaves behind 2 sisters and a brother, as well as his parents and the Salesian family, his high school.
Thank you, Mr. LaPonge.
Members, I ask for your adjourned in memory of Lance Parker, the nephew of Olivia Mitchell from our own city department. Also, I ask for your adjourned in memory of Delmar Watson, who was one of the great Watson brothers who photographed all of Los Angeles for years and years. He was a child actor, and he was the staff photographer for the Hollywood Citizen News and other things. You've all met him over the course of time. Delmar lived a wonderful life, and he will always be in the thoughts of many in Hollywood. Delmar Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Mr. President, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Judith Carr Arend. Judith Carr Arend was born October 13th, 1938, and died on October 22nd, 2008, as a result of a fatal accident while walking near her home on Palisades Drive in Pacific Palisades. In fact, it was a little before sunrise. She took her morning constitutional walk. She was the caregiver for her husband, and a freak accident happened. A young man on a bicycle ran into her, and right then and there, that was the last moment she had with us. Judy graduated from Marymount High School and USC and was a devout Catholic. Following her marriage, she raised her family for many years in the North Shores of the suburbs of Chicago before returning to Los Angeles to work with her father, who was the founder and chairman of Multimedia Services. Throughout her life, Judy was a devoted wife, mother, and a kind and caring friend to all who knew her. She was an accomplished tennis player, and in her last decade took up golf with as much passion as her busy life would allow. She adored her grandchildren and niece, and they returned the favor. She was an adventurous traveler and fabulous cook. As someone once said, she made everything she did look easy and effortless. She never wasted a move. In recent years, Judy devoted herself to caring for her parents, who have now deceased, and her husband, who continues to suffer from a long-term illness. Judy gave greatly not only to her immediate family, but also to her extended family for many treasured friends. Judy's family and friends could not love and respect her more. They will all miss her so very much and will cherish her memory and contributions to their lives. In fact, the Pacific Palisades is still in mourning over it. A memorial service was just held at the Corpus Christi Catholic Church yesterday, October 27th. She is survived by her husband, her Tom, her daughter Kathy, and her son Tom, and I spoke to the two of them shortly after she passed, as well as her grandchildren Christina, Jessica, Sophia, and Tanya. She is also survived by her brother, Tim Carr, his wife Evelyn, and her niece Rebecca Eaton, as well as her beloved aunt, Barbara Alcini. May she rest in peace.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl. Any other adjourning motions? Mr. Alicorn, I'm sorry.
Yes, members, the San Fernando Valley lost a true icon just today. Mother Rosa L. Bradas was born on December 8, 1918, and came to the San Fernando Valley in the late 1940s with her husband and the first of 5 of her 11 children. She's a native of Arkansas, where she received her academic foundation attending public elementary and junior high schools. Her higher education was obtained at AME Zion School in Warren, Arkansas, and Morris Brooker Memorial in Dermott, Arkansas. She held positions of leadership in local, district, and state Baptist work in Arkansas and California. In May of 1955, she and her husband, the late Dr. Hillary T. Broadus, organized the Calvary Baptist Church of Pacoima, one of the largest Baptist churches in the San Fernando Valley. Mother Broadus served in nearly every area of leadership at Calvary. Mother Broadus raised 10 children, and yet she somehow managed to effectively divide her time between home, church, and her community. She served on the executive boards of various PTAs such as Basilone Homes in Sun Valley, Pacoima Elementary PTA, and San Fernando Council PTA. In her later years, while most of her children had gone off to college, Mother Broadus returned to school herself, enrolling in Mission College and later Cal State University Northridge, where she consistently made the dean's list. Some of Mother Broadus' honors and activities over the years include she organized the San Fernando Valley's first community-wide Negro History Week observance, was initially the first vice president of the San Fernando Valley branch of the NAACP, and she was a fundraiser for the Cancer Foundation, Heart Foundation, March of Dimes, Red Cross, United Way, and at the same time while serving as a Scout, Den Mother, and Girl Scout leader. 6 of Mother Broadus' children have been ordained as ministers, and 3 of her grandchildren are ordained preachers. All of her children attended college, and some have postgraduate degrees, including 2 doctorates. Her son Arthur Broadus worked with me in Mayor Bradley's office in the San Fernando Valley for a couple of years. In 2000, Mother's Day edition of the Los Angeles Times, Mother Broadus was one of the 5 women honored. We thank Mother Broadus for her 60 years of service to our community. She is survived by 9 children, 35 grandchildren, and 35 great-grandchildren. Mother Broadus was sort of a quiet person in public, but she had a tremendous impact on the San Fernando Valley. Her and her husband, Hillary, really created the development or provided the opportunity for the positive development of the African American community in the San Fernando Valley. They were an anchor to it. They still are under the leadership of Bill Broadus, the pastor at Calvary today. So I'm very close to this family. I've been for many, many years, been friends. Hired Arthur in the mayor's office, and I can tell you that she will be sorely missed, but she had a great life, and I know that the family is appreciating God's welcome to their mother. So with that, we extend our condolences to all the Broadus family. It's a huge family, nationwide family. When they have a reunion, states lose population, and so we want to wish that family well. I know that they will appreciate it, and yes, I thought
we'll do all members
would like to do that. A second person who was also very active in the community passed away last Friday, October 24th, of natural causes at 90 years old. That's Maxima Rose. I think most of you might know Greta, Greta White, who is his wife. If you're a politician in the San Fernando Valley, she has probably been in your face on issues to clean up the neighborhood. But her husband, Max, was always by her side, and I'm very saddened that he's passed, although he had a very long and successful life. Max passed away peacefully at home of natural causes with his wife, Greta White, by his side. Max was born in Tacoma, Washington on December 31st, 1917. He worked for 19 years as a customer service rep for Spectral Lab troubleshooting for their helicopter strobe lights division, and he retired at the age of 72. He and his wife Greta were members of the Piccadilly Club in Canoga Park for over 30 years. This British club included members from all over the San Fernando Valley, and they enjoyed traveling with the club to locations all over the world. Max was a volunteer at the Van Nuys Division of the Los Angeles Police Department for over 15 years. He and Greta were named Volunteers of the Year by Van Nuys Division in the early 1990s for their outstanding work. Together they formed the Panorama City West Neighborhood Watch over 20 years ago and are still working hard to improve their community. He was a great husband, great father, grandfather, and friend, and community servant. He was extremely quiet. He let Greta do most of the talking, but he was always there to support community efforts, especially to reduce crime in Panorama City, and he will be greatly missed. My best goes out to Greta, of course, their son and 2 daughters, and we know that this is a hard blow for Greta. Her partner has passed, and I know that she will take it hard. So we give our best to her and express our condolences to the family.
Thank you. If there's no other adjourning motions, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. We'll next be in session tomorrow. That's the 29th of